And we're back.
Welcome to episode 162 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Today we will be talking about stars, the final frontier. Rebel starships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire.
Wait, what?
And they have a plan. All that to say, Starfinder is almost here.
Woo!
Param, are you ready?
I am so ready for Starfinder.
Param, how could you possibly be ready? The core rulebook's not out yet.
Well, I have been paying apt attention to all the previews and the many fine seminars released on No Direction.
Well, there's only so prepared you can be based on seminars and whatnot, Param, even though, yes, we've done a good job of previewing it. But we really wanted to, ramp up to warp speed, light speed, whichever one technically goes faster. And to do that, we brought on a couple of members of Paizo's Starfinder team. Returning to the show is the Starfinder design lead, Mr. Owen Casey Stevens. Hi, Owen.
Hi, folks. How you doing?
Speaking for them, they're fine. And joining us for the first time is Starfinder developer Jason Keeley. Hi, Jason.
Hello.
Jason has just realized I didn't make sure that that's how you pronounce your name. It's phonetic, right? It's Keeley?
Yeah, you got it. It's a good
That's
old
cool.
Irish name.
Excellent. So, how about that Starfinder?
This is the thing that has eaten most of our time for the past year, or actually significantly more, like 15 months, 16 months. So it is a really weird place to be right now because, of course, the core rulebook has shipped. So we've moved on to books beyond that, some of which we haven't even announced yet.
Yeah.
So we're in this place where we're trying to figure out what we should add to this game that no one has in their hands yet. So we are trying to get prepared for you all to be prepared for Starfinder so we can see what parts of it we need to evolve, improve, expand, whatever. It's when you're rolling out a new game, that gap between when you're done with your part of that first book and no one else has seen it yet is always a weird place to be, and we're smack dab in that right now.
Yeah, based on user feedback, people would really like the core rulebook.
and we really want them to have the core rulebook. We're all on the same page with that.
Now, we are definitely going to dive into a lot of Starfinder stuff in the next hour or so. But before that, when we first met the Starfinder design team, it consisted of James Sutter, Rob McCreary, and you, Owen. But since then, the team's grown, and it now includes Jason. So, Jason, what is your role in Starfinder, and why were you brought on board?
Well, I was actually...
I should have said beamed on board.
Beamed? So close. I was actually an editor working on all the projects, and they were ramping up on Starfinder. Core rulebook is a big, hefty beast, so needed more eyes on it, and they brought me on board to sort of work on development, and they just kind of threw me in the deep end a little bit, and threw me in the office with Rob and Owen. So I get to hear them bicker all day, and that basically I've been working on whatever needs to get worked on. A lot of focus on the Starships stuff and the monster creation stuff for the book that's coming out 2 months from the core book.
Aliens, they're not monsters.
Aliens.
Until you get to know them. Then
monsters,
you can decide if they're
aliens,
monsters.
NPCs. The point is that we've got a single unified system that handles everything that isn't a player character and does move or shoot, and stuff that doesn't. And Jason has really taken point on taking a lot of those things and bringing them forward. So he's done a lot of the development work on that.
And what we've seen from your Free RPG Day product, there is actually a significant difference there between how it's handled in Pathfinder.
That's right.
Absolutely. In Pathfinder, you really sort of build monsters and NPCs like you build player characters, whether you're using an NPC class or if you're building a monster type, right? A dragon has a certain number of skill points and hit dice and hit points and feats per level, etc., which means making a new one takes as much time as making a new player character. But as any GM knows, a new player character can last a lot of game sessions. A new monster tends not to make it out of the encounter you introduce it to. There are exceptions to that, but it does feel like the old trope that it takes 10 hours to prepare 2 hours of gaming is rooted in part with trying to make those NPCs monsters and aliens. So we looked at what was done in Pathfinder Unchained with an alternate creation system that basically says, hey, what CR do you want? What is the appropriate role and numbers and values for that CR? And then you can focus on what are the interesting things that makes this monster different from other monsters. and it's a faster, easier, more intuitive system. One of the real frustrations with the Pathfinder system is if I want to make a dragon and I pick it CR, I do not immediately know how many hit dice that needs to be. I instead have to use the hit dice and its con and its hit points and then see how close to the values that are appropriate for the CR I want those are. And that is really a fairly backwards way of creating something that you're going to end up using. So we've tried to reverse the process based on what they did in Unchained. And you've done a lot of the development work on that. Talk a little bit about what you found useful and not useful, if you want to.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a pretty intuitive system, I think. And once you've got the charts, and you can basically just sort of like pick your CR, and you've got like 75% of the monster right there, and then you just get to add some fun stuff. It leaves more time to do the fun abilities that a lot of Paizo creatures are known for. And so I really appreciate that you guys, we had that idea before I came in. It's like, oh, we want to do the monster creation this way. So when I came in to, hey, or do monsters, that it was already sort of mostly set up.
Param, how do you feel about that?
I've been begging them to switch that to that Unchained monster rules in the mainline Pathfinder ever since they released it. So I'm cool with that. I also find that system makes the monsters easier to use at a glance too, because the cool stuff they do is all spelled out right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't halfway through an encounter find a feat that would have been great at the beginning of the encounter.
Right.
Combat reflexes.
I have literally, using a few of those charts, I have converted the Emerald Spire adventure to Starfinder on the fly, because I can just look at, oh, this is a CR3 critter. Well, I know all these basics right here, and then the Pathfinder special abilities largely work the same. So it can be very, very quick to adapt things and move forward, and that's something I couldn't do if I was trying to convert a second edition monster to Pathfinder, for example. I could not just look at the second edition stats and go, okay, I know exactly what this would do.
Now, we appreciate the insight into the design that went into the different aspects of Starfinder, but we are looking at this today from a player's point of view, specifically a player with no access to the core rulebook who hopes that maybe the day that they get this core rulebook, they are ready to play their first game. So let's look at some of the ways that Starfinder is different from Pathfinder. And because I remember one time a couple of years ago, I was at a convention, I played a 3.0 Dungeons and Dragons game, and I felt lost playing a system that I was very familiar with, but it was so close to what I knew that I was baffled. And I have a feeling there might be a similar period of adjustment for Starfinder players.
We actually we are working on, although it is not yet available, a thing we're calling the One Sheet, which is the one page that is most useful if you know how to play Pathfinder to tell you how to play Starfinder. So it includes things like there are no iterative attacks. If you've got a +6 base attack bonus, you don't get one attack at +6 and one at +1. Instead, everyone can attack once as a standard action, everyone can attack twice as a full action, but both attacks are at -4. That means that at first level, you've got these additional options you didn't have previously. You might not want to take that option because you're less likely to hit. But that sort of note is a place where once you have grasped that difference, the rest of it goes very smoothly. I've got an attack bonus. I roll a d20. I add it. I've got a target number I'm trying to hit. We've broken up armor class a little differently, but it's still a form of armor class. So once you know these little differences, people seem to actually pick up on the game very, very quickly.
So you say you're preparing that one sheet. How is it going to be available?
I believe it will be hopefully it will be at Gen Con, and then I'm pretty sure we'll also make it available as a PDF online. There's no reason we wouldn't.
All right, so iterative attacks, you said different defenses. What else? What are some of the other Pathfinder rules you need to unlearn?
Should we start from the beginning? Maybe start at character creation?
Yeah, talk about character
Sure.
creation.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you're going to want to do.
So character creation is different from the beginning, but not so much different that you won't be able to recognize it. Instead of doing the 46, drop the lowest, although that is an option you can do, the sort of standard option is a point-by system, but it is a simplified point-by system. You start with 10s and everything. You add your modifiers from race. You get a modifier from theme, which we'll talk about later. Add all that in, and then spend 10 points on a one-for-one basis. Can't make anything higher than 18, and then you're done. So you've got your stats at least, not done with your character, but you got your stats. And so that's a real easier, sort of simplified version of how with the point buy, different points for different levels, or a 46. Although that's always fun. We do have an option if you want to.
Die rolling is totally in there. We've got some die hard roll ability scores, or you're not playing a D20 based game anymore. People in the office, so that is totally an option. But yeah, one of the things that happens anytime I want to make a character from a point buy system for a game just on the fly, I'm always like, who has that chart?
Yeah.
So they know how many points it is to buy a 15 or a 16. I don't have that memorized. I've been doing this for 20 years and I don't have that memorized. 17, I guess, for that chart. And if it's 1 for 1, hey, I've got a 10. I want a 14. That's 4 points. That's really straightforward. I think themes are actually the other big exciting thing that we ought to talk about.
Right at the beginning, yeah. So besides all of the new races that we have, which are just, give you some bonuses and penalties to certain stats and give you special abilities like they do in Pathfinder. But the other thing you're going to choose besides your class is a theme. And a theme is a sort of an extra added icing on your character's cake that lets you sort of pick kind of like maybe how your character's background was about, or what your character strives to do out in space. So we've got themes like ace pilot, or priest, or scholar, or icon, which is your celebrity one. If you want to say, hey, I want my character to be famous. Great, you're slightly famous, and you get more. And what a theme does is gives you something at first level. Besides giving you an extra point on your ability scores, it also gives you a little extra knowledge skills. And then as you level up, what is it, like 6, 12, 18, something like that, you get an extra added benefit that you just get. You don't have to spend feats on it. You don't have to spend skill ranks on it or anything like that. You just get some extra goodies that are for your theme.
And what these basically replace are the favorite class bonuses and the campaign traits of Pathfinder. And the thing about those, and there's nothing wrong with them, I love those things, but if I am making a 8th level character, if my character's gone to 8th level, and I've got 8 favorite class bonus picks and 2 campaign traits, that's 10 decisions I have to make, each of which I'm going to want to look at every possible choice to make sure that I am not missing the most thematic thing that will make my character just perfect, and each of which has very little individual impact on the game, right? I've got 1 more hit point. That's not a huge difference. So with themes, we have added a new customization option so that your soldier priest is going to feel different in play from someone else's soldier mercenary. You can both do what a soldier does, but the things that you know and the kind of things you're interested in, and as you gain levels, the things you get better at are going to be different with one simple choice that you can just look at. And we got 10 themes in the book?
Yeah.
If you include themeless, or is that separate? Okay. We also have an option. If you don't have a theme for your character, or none of the themes we've released yet make sense for you, you can just pick a themeless character, which sort of makes you, by default, a jack-of-all-trades kind of person, that you've got some generic bonuses that are still useful to your character. You're not any less powerful, but they are not themed. Yeah. But I think one of the things about themes is that a lot of people are, instead of describing their characters as, I'm a half-orc fighter, a lot of them are going to be describing their character with that theme first. So it'll be, I am a icon half-orc envoy, because that theme describes sort of what your character's in-world view and role is, more than necessarily being a soldier or being a half-orc or some of those more gamist things.
I have to back you up on that, because my party's getting ready to start Starfinder, my local group, and they're not talking about the classes as much as they're like, well, I'm going to be the captain and I'm going to be the pilot, so who's going to be the engineer? And that's how they're making their decisions, and the themes seem to be the thing that tie most closely to that.
Some do. I mean, some of those things are roles in Starship combat, which is another thing that's going to be different. Right. But the thing about Starship combat is we tried, in Starship combat, every character has something that they get to do every turn. But we tried to have those things, for the most part, not be things that you have to have spent resources that aren't useful outside Starship combat. So, sure, there's a pilot skill, but piloting skill is also how you fly a hover bike or drive a tank or any of those other vehicle options. We do have an ace pilot theme, and that sort of that is iconic to heroic science fiction, so we wanted to have a nod to that, but we do not, for example, have a captain theme. But there are ways that you can do that, right? One of the things we've done at the end of each class is we have, after each character class, 4 sketches of a character build. So we say, okay, here's the envoy, and then here are 4 different ways you can build an envoy. And here's the military officer. So he's an envoy who perhaps has the ace pilot theme and is a human, and then here are some of his feats, and here are some of his class choices. And it's not a full character sheet, but it's just a hint of how can you use these different elements to make different kinds of characters. And so that's sort of our short roadmap to show people that class and theme and race can be combined in a lot of different ways.
Now, in Pathfinder, you've got the 4 pillars of a balanced party. Do themes play into the pillar? Actually, is there any equivalent in Starfinder, like with ship roles, with just balanced party?
You want people to cover multiple ship roles. That shouldn't be hard. And you can have a single person who's good at multiple ship roles. It's not hard to be good at being the pilot and being good at being a gunner. It's not hard to be good at being the captain and being good at being a science officer. A lot of these things are just tied to one skill, and that skill you're going to use a fair amount anyway. So if you want to be good at Starship combat as a group, that might be worth a quick conversation, but it's not a major element. As far as personal scale combat, there sort of isn't the level of needing the core 4, right? You don't have to have a fighter equivalent, a thief equivalent, a wizard equivalent, and a cleric equivalent. And some of those don't necessarily have a direct equivalent. And part of that is because this is a science fiction game. So if you need your party to be able to fly and set things on fire, you don't need a wizard. You can make do with a jetpack and a flamethrower, and anyone can have those.
I like that really, it lines up with my point that thanks to technology, everyone's a laser wizard.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the recommended builds at it, and then I'm looking at the class previews that have come out. The Mystic, for instance, its class preview, and then the page layouts in First Contact. It seems like you guys are taking a lot of lessons and inspiration from the RPG strategy guide.
Oh, gosh. We're trying to get a little more graphical elements, thanks to our wonderful art department, to sort of make the game not just giant walls of text everywhere. We've had great art obviously in the past, but sometimes it can be a little intimidating for new players to look at the Pathfinder core rulebook and go like, wow, that is a lot. So we have thrown in symbols here and there that help you sort of get a connection to the material. We've thrown in lots of good, great art that is just like, oh wait, I see this piece of art, and you can point at that and go, I want to play that character because that art looks so awesome, and then be able to figure out how to do that pretty easily.
Another thing that is hopefully important to players, and this is work that mostly our development coordinator, Amanda Hammond-Coons, who was part of the Starfinder team for a while, people shift in and shift out as needed. One of the things she did a great job with was looking at this book and saying, if I drop this 500-plus page tome in front of someone, and I tell them, make a character, how hard is it to even figure out what to do? So she looked at, if you are new to role-playing games, or if you understand role-playing games but you've never played Pathfinder, you're not familiar with this line of games, how do we get you the information in a easily digestible form to say, here are the steps, these are why they're important, this is what's relevant. And so that sort of, there are some chapters that are heavily that, but we also tried to look at that throughout. So for example, each class has a key ability score. Now, that key ability score is in some ways directly mechanical, right? The Mystic's key ability score is Wisdom. All of the Mystic's spells and all of the Mystic's class features that have a save DC are all tied to Wisdom. That means that later, if we have a new spell that we write up and we want it to do damage a certain number of times equal to whatever is the ability score that applies to your save DCs for spells, in Pathfinder we literally don't have a word for that mechanic, right? It's int for wizards, it's charisma for sorcerers, but we don't have a name for that thing. So now we've got a name for it. It's your key ability score. But that's also a place where we can say, hey, if you want to play an operative, not only is dexterity tied to a lot of your special abilities as your key ability score, but it's just also really kind of important for a typical operative to have a good dexterity, so that you don't have someone make an operative and think, well, my operative clearly will focus almost entirely on intelligence and wisdom because that's who I want to play. You can do that, and there are even effective builds with that. But the normal assumed progression is you're going to focus on dexterity because it's key.
We have a couple of listener questions. Now, some of these questions are more broad Starfinder questions, and that's fine for now, but I am going to remind our audience that the key here is that we want to learn how to play Starfinder right out of the gate. So if you have any questions, if you're worried about what your first session is going to look like, those are the kind of questions that we are specifically looking for. First one's not a question. It's a reference. It's not even phrased as a joke. Zerg Titan 92 just says D810 sniper rifles.
All right, okay, look. You guys, seriously, sometimes we type things wrong.
It's kind of amazing that doesn't happen more
That's
often.
Jason's theory. My theory is that sniper rifles used to do a D810. You all have dice rollers, and that in playtesting we discovered that maybe at second and third level that was too much. So
Second and third level, not at first level.
Exactly. No, I mean at first level you can't get a D810 sniper rifle,
fair.
right?
Yeah.
So we carefully warned people with First Contact that we were putting out that product before we had developed everything. We experimented with the 3-digit sighted weapons, and it turns out that they just kill everything in one shot. So we have made some adjustments.
Now, I would imagine the kickback would also kill the person with the gun.
Sure, but we didn't even have room to say that in First Contact,
Yeah.
so you just have to infer that.
Actually, before we get to more listener questions, then, weapons are very different. It's a lot more about the rider ability and less about the damage.
That's not entirely true. So weapons are in a way very, very, very similar. I look at a chart, I buy a weapon, it tells me how much it costs, how much it weighs. Our bulk system is simplified, but even so. How much damage it does and of what type. But in Pathfinder, weapons basically do 3 types of damage: bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, or some combination thereof. In Starfinder, we have lasers and cryo guns and plasma cannons and sonic screamers, and all of these things mean that just a weapon off the rack can do fire, acid, heat, that's fire, cold, electricity, sonic. It can do it in a line, it can do it in an explosion, it can do it in a cone, it can do a lot of dice, it can do a little dice, it can be powered, it can be analog, which we are using incorrectly just to mean unpowered because we had to find a single word for it. And then we also have critical hit effects. So when you get a critical in Starfinder, you roll a 20, that's a crit, there's no confirmation roll. It's only a 20, there are no expanded threat ranges. And you do double damage. Done. A lot of weapons also have a critical hit effect, and those are different. So if I'm using a flamethrower, my critical hit effect may be burn 1d6. If I crit you, not only do I do a bunch of fire damage, but you are on fire. If it's a big gyrojet pistol, it might have knockdown. So not only do I crit you, but you are knocked to the ground by the force of it. Those riders are usually connected to a critical hit, so they don't come up that often. We do also have special weapon qualities, which are things like the old block or operative instead of monk, right? Yeah. That tell you how weapons work. So the damage is still important, and rather than buying more and more magic weapons with more and more accuracy so that more and more attacks become important, sort of the magic that you would put on your weapon has been rolled into just more and more expensive, more powerful weapons, so that we do have weapons that do 8d10 or 10d12, etc. at higher levels. That is important, but what makes them different is, what is the energy type? Is it a line? Is it a cone? Does it have the boost function? Does it explode? Is it unwieldy? And by defining a few things like that, we end up with, there are thousands of possible combinations. We did our best to cover a good selection in the core rulebook, but there are obviously lots and lots and lots of weapon builds we could apply, and that's even before we get to things like magic weapon fusions and special ammunition and special materials.
Grenades.
Yeah, grenades.
Yeah.
We got a big chart of grenades. Grenades turn out to be really popular. People like grenades.
People like grenades.
I like grenades. There's something else that was odd about some of the weapon stat blocks you all have previewed. They have a level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So the level is not necessarily a sort of a function of what you're allowed to buy. It just helps the GM determine when it should be available for characters at their level. So if you go, like as Owen has, I've heard Owen say a few times in this sort of thing, in Pathfinder, if you want to give your level 1 if a GM wants to give level 1 characters and I forgot what they call it, a Holy Avenger, +5, right? That's fine, well, and legal. There's nothing that will stop you from doing that. That first level character will then just be able to murder everything around it. And as such, you can give a Starfinder first level character a 20th level gun that does whatever 20d12 damage, and that's just going to unbalance the game entirely, of course.
The first level character is perfectly free to pull the trigger on that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It does have some impact on what you can buy, because this is a civilized setting. So, for example, if you want to buy a flamethrower, or more importantly, an atomic weapon in the real world, there are some licensing requirements. And even if you want to avoid licensing, you have to have a relationship with someone that has access to a missile launcher in order to buy one. So rather than carefully track how many factions do you have credit with, how many different licensings do you get, are you trusted by your organization to carry attack nuke, we just basically say, hey, in most places you can buy something up to your level +1. In a really big city, you can buy it up to your level +2. That's a guideline on what your character has the credentials and reputation to get. It's not a hard rule. If a GM says you find a crate of 14th level weapons as 4th level characters, he's perfectly free to do that. That's just, as Jason said, exactly the same as saying, here's a +5 Bane versus Evil Holy Weapon. I hope you guys enjoy it at 4th level. The other thing that item levels do is when we are determining hardness or hit points or saving throws or save DCs, or for that matter, there are like some abilities that allow you to create a weapon, like with a spell or magic, whatever. Having those weapons and all equipment, for that matter, have a level gives us a number that we can reference, and that is why we added that to this game. So there's a system that not only tells player and GM when are we expecting this to enter the game, roughly, but also allows us to game mechanically tie to it. So if we want to have if we were doing like Marvelous Pigments as a random example, we could say, here are Marvelous Pigments, but you can only draw, it's a magic Etch-a-Sketch. Here's a magic Etch-a-Sketch, to make it a little more tech. But you can only draw things of level 8 or less. And then that's a built-in, easily explained rule on how powerful this thing is.
The levels also determine like what you can craft when you get the appropriate skills, basically. So it's a good way to keep that on count.
I have a question. I like it a lot from Ask a Pathfinder. With all the focus on ranged firearms, future tech, etc., how does melee-based combat play a role in the world?
So melee-based combat in Starfinder is going to be a lot like melee-based combat in Star Wars or Star Trek or Andromeda, right? Not every character is probably going to be carrying a melee weapon as their primary weapon. That said, there are still 3 things that provoke attacks of opportunity in Starfinder, but only 3 things. If you leave a threat in space, or if you cast a spell, unless the spell says otherwise, or if you make a ranged attack, you provoke. Not drawing equipment, not getting up off the ground, not contemplating your navel. Only these 3 things. But that does mean that there's an advantage to having a melee weapon and leaping up into somebody's face so they can't cast a spell or make a ranged attack without taking damage. So if you build a character who is designed for melee combat, we have the weapons and the options and the class features that make that an effective option. But that means you've decided to play the Jedi or the Klingon who specialized with the Batleth, or a old Andromedan Republic person that has the Force Lance.
Street Samurai.
Street Samurai. And, you get to add your strength to the damage on those things. So we calculate, when we did the math, and we did the math on all of this stuff, we took into effect what the effectiveness of a melee weapon versus a ranged weapon was and how that plays out. The other thing is, since making a single attack is a more attractive option than it is in Pathfinder at mid and high levels, it is less of a cost to run up and attack somebody. And we've got jump jets and flight systems and all sorts of things that allow everyone to get anywhere much more easily. So in playtest, melee options have remained strong, effective options. They are most effective if that's what your character focuses on, just like if you're a soldier with a laser, you're going to want to take the gear boost for soldiers that affects laser accuracy. If you are wanting to use melee weapons, you're going to want to take the gear boost that applies to melee weapons. So that's sort of true for all character classes.
And heck, if you happen to be one of the races that has multiple arms, or you get one grafted onto you, you might as well have a gun and a couple arms, and then hold a knife in the other one, just in case someone tries to run up to you and cast a spell, or you happen to be next to someone who's shooting a weapon, you can just give them a good stabbing.
Yeah, extra arms don't affect the number of attacks you get, but if you're a Kasatha who already starts with 4 arms, and you add 2 additional cybernetic arms, so you have 6 arms, you're going to have a lot of stuff ready to go all at once. So you can have a 2-handed melee weapon, and a 2-handed ranged weapon, and a spare clip in hand.
And a grenade.
And a grenade,
maybe,
right, yeah. You're set, so you've got options.
Oh, since we were talking about character creation, you just mentioned cybernetic arms. That's something you can't get in Pathfinder.
Sure isn't.
Sure you can. You just need the right book.
Which book?
Technology Guide.
Technology
Yeah.
guide,
Oh, yeah. All right. I should have known that.
See, you all know, right? Not to mention that we've also done, some of the books have, gear work limbs and such. So it can be done, but yeah, it's a lot more common. Cybernetics is a section in the equipment section. They've got prices and rules for running them, and if that's what you want to do, it's a perfectly valid option, but it's not a mandatory one. We don't want people to have to play cyborgs in order to keep up with the power curve, but we also don't want to penalize people that are interested in that as a character idea.
Are there any fun cybernetics that you are a favorite of?
So the augmentation section includes cybernetics and biotech. And one of the things in biotech is the dragon gland, which gives you a breath weapon, right? You can have a custom-built breath weapon gland installed in your character. When I did the play test on Twitch for several streaming folks, that was our first time we were running a game with the full rule set. One of the characters picked a dragon gland, and he just loved the fact that he could, at a limited number of times, but at a level appropriate power level, he could breathe fire. That is a cool thing to be able to bolt onto your character.
Yes, breathing fire is always in the top 10 things you want to be able to do. Now, I do have a completely random question inspired by chat. They said grenades of wonder, so I'm wondering, are there healing grenades?
Are there healing grenades?
No.
There are not in
healing
the core rulebook healing grenades. Trying to think if there's any way you could set one up, but I'm not thinking of it immediately.
Well, how does healing work in Starfinder? Mm-hmm. And then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to tackle the various
Yes.
the rules on damage?
Yes, well, so one of the, I guess we have to take a step back and talk about how the fact that one of the differences between Pathfinder and Starfinder is you've got hit points in both games, but in Starfinder you also have stamina points, which you also get every level. These stamina points are basically sort of work as a sort of an ablative temporary hit points kind of situation, where any damage you take comes off the stamina points first, and then when those hit 0, you start taking real damage to your hit points. And we have a third sort of resource that is called resolve points, which are basically sort of all those different pools we have in lots of different Pathfinder classes like Key and Panache and whatnot, sort of all rolled into one thing. Some abilities you'll be able to use your resolve points to cast certain spells or to do other abilities as according to your class. But mainly you're going to be using them when you're in between fights. You're going to you can take a 10-minute rest, you spend a resolve point, and then you get all of your stamina back. So you're ready, you're fresh, ready to go for another fight. Now, if you've taken half your hit point damage, that half hit point damage is still there. You're still wounded, but you've got some fresh stamina that you can go and maybe go into a fight and not be so worried. The Envoy has has at least one ability that can grant stamina back in the middle of a fight, which is always helpful. The Mystic is able to heal hit points at a certain level, kind of thing, like second or third, and that works in I think that's mostly just a burst. But there's a couple. I think if you take
they've got the Mystic Cure spell.
The Mystic, and then then you've got Magic. Which gives a spell that you can cast to cure people. And the fun thing about the Mystic Cure spell is that when you cast it, if you roll really well and that person you've cast it on gets full up on hit points, you can take those extra hit points and give them to yourself if you need them. Alternatively, you can sacrifice some of your own hit points to give to the person you're healing if you rolled not so well on the whatever D8. And then we have the serums of healing, which are sort of our potions of healing. They're just basically just that. You go out and you buy them, drink them up, get some hit points back.
And it is standard for a first level character to buy at least a couple of serums of healing. It's not something that you have to wait until you're second or third to pick up. We've got higher level ones later on in the game that heal more, but the standard serum of healing is at this point pretty ubiquitous, right? There are probably vending machines that have serums of healing that you can put in, and in case you accidentally break your thumb on the work site, you can just go get that fixed.
But you said that these are still positive energy magical, right?
Well, serums of healing only affect living creatures. They do not, however, damage undead. So there is still a connection between many forms of healing magic and positive energy, but that is not necessarily ubiquitous. And part of this is because the serum of healing is designed to work on pretty much any injury of any species, of any class throughout the galaxy. In fact, we've got cloud-based and ooze-based creatures, right? That can't even necessarily drink a serum, so they can
rub it on their faces.
Yeah, exactly. So the serum is assumed to have been designed to do a whole lot more than my vaguely humanoid friend has a recognizable injury. They're really as far as hit points go, they're a panacea. But magic healing does not normally affect stamina. So all of the magic healing we're talking about is only for hit points. Yeah. And normally only the envoy and a few people can boost their own stamina. But normally it's only a sort of morale type bonus that can do a stamina boost. So these divide these things. But because one resolve point will restore all of your stamina with a 10-minute rest, what we've seen in playtest is that a lot of groups don't need anyone who is the dedicated healer. We also have med patches, and we've got a medicine skill, and we've got medical kits, so there are also ways to get hit points back with time, with science. But I have run games that have 4 soldiers, and they do just fine as a group with no spellcaster, no healer, no dedicated face, as long as people either accept that we're just not good at diplomacy, or one of those characters. Frequently, one of the things that will happen with themes is that you might get a class skill or a bonus to a class skill. So you might be, well, my soldier is an icon, so I am good at diplomacy. I'm not sure if icon gives you diplomacy, but the point is there are those things. So that there are ways for your 4 soldiers with different themes and different fighting styles and different gear boosts, all using different advanced science and some magic items, can be very different characters and complement each other just fine.
And where do androids fit into that?
Androids are a race. Androids are mechanical beings who are sufficiently complex to support and receive a soul. They're roughly the same androids as Pathfinder. So androids like Kasatha and Isoki and all the other races are just something you select. An android automatically has 1 armor upgrade slot, which is how we keep track of how much you can put in your armor. So the fact that they are a technological being is relevant. If you're at high enough level, you can, as an android, have a flight pack built directly into your system, and you can swap it out later. But they are officially living beings. They're just living technological constructed beings. They are humanoids with the constructed feature that causes some things to interact with them differently.
And are there other scales of robots?
I mean, in the core rulebook, we mostly deal with androids and the player character stuff. But I mean, we've got security bots in Alien Archive.
Mechanics, drones.
And the mechanic can have a drone as one of the options, which is another kind of robot creature. So we presume there are going to be robots all over the place. And anyone that's read Distant Worlds know that we've got the first world in the system, Abalon?
Abalon.
Abalon is covered in robots. Many of them sentient robots, some of them waiting for one of their mega computers to become a god. That was back in the Pathfinder time. But that means that since Triune is around and is the all code and is the living computer/robot deity, I presume there are Abalonian priests who do robotic rites to their computer god.
The First Church of Robotology.
Reformed.
There was a follow-up question from Ask Pathfinder about melee. It says deflecting ranged attacks and the like is a means of surviving with melee weapons.
Question mark.
Those are options. It is easiest if you are Solarian, but other people can get it eventually.
We also have...
Somebody asked for more information about Solarians.
Yeah.
That was it. It was, tell me more about Solarians from Zerg Titan.
So Solarians grew about because while we were working on the classes, at one point, Rob McCreary, who's the creative lead, looked at everything we had planned out at that point and said, where's the really new class? The class that you can't immediately say, hey, this is the Starfinder version of X. The thing that is different, right? We've got different cultures. The Kasatha showed up in the world ship, the Adari. They've got their own whole world culture with them. There should be philosophies and ideas and concepts that didn't grow out of Golarion. So that is where our Solarian came from. And then I did a version of the class, and the Pathfinder design team did a version of the class, and I think you developed it, didn't you?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. There was a really chaotic period where everyone was working on everything, I mean, honestly, and certainly Rob worked in the class. But the Solarian is a contemplative warrior who has a connection to the primal forces of the universe, specifically those that come from solar bodies, which are defined as access to photons and gravitons. And they go through a cycle of attunement in combat where they choose if they're going to become photon attuned or graviton attuned. And they've got a series of powers. They have graviton powers and photon powers. And if you can pick all of one or the other, but if you become unbalanced, then you're not in the cycle as well, and you don't get some of the advantages. So most Solarians will have an equal number of photon and graviton powers. And you can use them most of the time without being attuned, but if you're attuned or fully attuned, which takes times, they have extra benefits. And those powers range from things like telekinesis, or setting things on fire, or being able to leap far distances, or explode.
Crush people with gravity.
Crush people with gravity. But even some are more metaphysical, right? So you can draw on the fact that all life traces its origin back to a sun, and use that connection to form a sense of kinship between you and another creature if you pick the right power. These are all specific manifestations. They can also either manifest a solar blade, which is a big energy weapon that can look like kind of whatever you want and works roughly the same way regardless, or a series of solar armor, which is an energy field that covers your regular armor and gives you additional benefits. And yes, one of the things you can pick, if you're a Solarian at the right level, is the ability to deflect incoming ranged attacks. No, I saw that in the movie once. So.
We've got a bit of a deluge of listener questions.
Yeah,
so are you okay
over.
if we go off script for a little bit just to try and get some of these out of the way?
Yeah,
well,
sure.
Not out of the way. They're good, valuable questions, but
good and
we're going
valuable
off script,
questions.
if that's all right with you.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Chris Kimball wants to know, is the alignment system intact?
The alignment, by the way, hi, Chris. I know that guy. So,
hi, Chris. I don't know that guy.
The alignment system is intact. It's the same 9 alignments. There's not as many things focusing on them in the game rules-wise. They're there for you to, you pick your alignment, and there might be a few things that ping off if you're evil or good or what have you. But for the most part, we don't have too much in the way of paladins being able to detect evil, say, just by looking at the person or smiting them. We do have holy and unholy weapons, which do affect evil and good creatures, but
they do it differently.
But they do it differently than in Pathfinder. So it's still there.
Runegg or Ronegg, one or the other. Are there any non-Pathfinder games that inspired parts of Starfinder? He's thinking rules-wise more than setting.
Oh, rules-wise? So there's a little... This is my 8th D20-based core rulebook that I have worked on, right? So, obviously, I have been trying to learn and improve as I go. So things from Star Wars Saga Edition, Star Wars Core Rulebook, both the D20 versions, the EverQuest role-playing game, Black Company, Thieves World. These are all... The Gamma World, for that matter. These are all things I worked on. And so I've tried to pick them up as we go. A lot of this stuff also, Bowman and the rest of the Pathfinder design team, those guys are always trying to keep up to date on what people are doing, what interesting ideas are out there. So I wouldn't say that, I mean, if there's one game that informed our design, it's Pathfinder. We wanted to be as close to Pathfinder compatible as we could be and still do the best game we could do for a science fantasy setting. So the honest answer is Pathfinder, but there's been a lot of stuff from a lot of games where we've looked at things and we thought, hey, that's a great way to handle that, right? Themes are a pretty common character trope, character concept, character background that you find in a lot of different games, and we liked how those games handled that, so we adopted it and made our own version of it.
Donato Classic says, as we're asking about getting ready for the game, what are the absolute minimum required sections for a GM or player to read before starting to play?
Well, okay. As a player, you'll obviously want to look at the introduction that tells you how to create a character, and it has all the themes. And like you can kind of just sort of maybe start from there, but you want to have that you want to have your character concept. So you want to look, at least glance through the races and the classes, so you know what's available to you. Eventually, you're going to want to buy equipment and look at feats and skills and all that stuff too. So you're going to, again, need to look at all that stuff. But if you just want to start making a character, just start with that character creation chapter, which does, if you're familiar with Pathfinder, a lot of it will be pretty familiar. But if you're not familiar with any role-playing game, it's a great place to start to read, because it gives you nice step-by-step instructions. As a GM, the whole book...
You don't have to read the whole book.
Well, you should.
So eventually, but not to start.
Not to start.
So we do actually have a section that's called something like the basics early on, that talks about, when we say PC, we mean player character. This is a player character. That's not a very long section, and if you are already a veteran of gaming, you probably don't need it, but it's there so you can start with it. And then we did our best to have the vast majority of rules that apply to a lot of different things get covered in a chapter called Tactical Rules. That is where the rules for making attacks and action types and movement and perception, all of that stuff is, and what ranges are and what areas are. A cone, for example, in Pathfinder is defined in the magic section, which is fine for Pathfinder because there aren't a whole lot of cones that aren't magical in nature. But in Starfinder, we've got flamethrowers. They can have cones. So we wanted to define areas and durations and effects in one place. And then most other sections of the game can refer to that when it's relevant, right? So if we say, when you take a full attack, you've got this other set of options, we can say, look at full attack in this chapter. So that's sort of the first place that I would try and hack around a little bit and read. We also have a glossary. So if when you're reading through this, you run into a section you don't recognize, you can try the glossary, and it'll give a short definition in a page. And then we did our best to have a useful index. So we've got references to help you find what you need if you haven't read it. But I would say the beginning play and the tactical rules are the big...
GM,
yeah.
And if you want to play in our setting, you can give that a quick glance through too, because it's in the core rulebook as well. We don't have a separate setting book, and so it gives us gives you a basic timeline of the history of the setting, what's going on right now, who are the major players, write up of every single planet and planet-like object in the solar system. So there's also a lot of good. I mean, it's also just a lot of good stuff in there. So I mean, that's why you do want to read it all eventually.
And, with just the core rulebook and First Contact, which is, I believe, still available as a free PDF on our site. Yeah. You can run a game, right? That's all you need to get a game and get something started. Your options are limited until we can put out Alien Archive, for example, which will not only give you a bunch of monsters, but tell you how to quickly and easily make your own. But that's enough to start playing.
Because the core rulebook and the Legacy conversion chapter, we do talk about how to use your Pathfinder bestiaries in Starfinder. So if you need that dragon, and it's not in First Contact, you need that demon, you need that devil, take a look at those guidelines, and it'll tell you how to quickly convert something over.
And also, if your favorite critter's in Bestiary 6, chances are we're not going to get to a Starfinder version of that for a while. But it is the same universe, it's the same cosmology. So by being able to convert those over fairly quickly and easily, we're trying to open up that if the GM has an idea from his Pathfinder stuff, he'll be able to bring that forward.
John Bastille has a question. It's a pair of questions I think are very closely related. How are Starship collisions handled? And by the way, are there rules for massive damage for characters? For example, if my ship crashes.
Starship collisions are not. They're handled and don't do that. And they don't do that rule. I know that, I think for the Gamma demo that I did for now I can't remember, Game Trade magazine, that I just sort of Jason Bulb and I were at Las Vegas talking about well, maybe we should have ramming actions, and they were like, well, that's not a great idea to do, but let's throw something together. And this is obviously as the book was also being shipped, so we didn't get them in the final rules, but we put something together, and it's basically you do a whole bunch of damage to your own ship and to the ship you do, and if you're smaller than so. It's not great. You mainly are just glancing off each other's shields, I think.
We assume that you will not accidentally collide with each other, and if you intentionally collide with each other, the GM gets to handle it, because this is just the core rulebook, and starships ramming each other isn't a core kind of thing. The Pathfinder core rulebook doesn't even have rules for archetypes in it, so there's stuff that just has to wait. This is already a 500-something page book. So I am sure we will address ramming. Jason and Jason have already taken a look at it, but that's not in the core. As far as massive damage goes,
yeah, actually we do have massive damage, don't we? It's when you're knocked down to below. If you happen to take as much damage, that would knock you to. Normally, when you hit 0 hit points, we don't have negative hit points. So to start it off with the basics right there.
You can't have fewer than no hit points.
When you have 0 hit points, you fall down. And then we have you start bleeding basically your resolve points, which is another way to use them. And you can spend those resolve points to stabilize yourself and then actually get back up in the fight if you have enough of them. However, if you are down and you have 0 hit points and then you happen to take more damage, if you take more damage in one shot equal to your maximum number of hit points, you are dead. So if a meteorite falls on you or your spaceship crashes, you probably are going to take that much amount of damage, which would be basically, if you're full hit points, I guess if you're full hit points and then full stamina, if you take all of your stamina, all of your hit points, and then all of your hit points again in one shot, you are, dead.
Oh. Now, I think maybe closer related, or following up on that, well, what do you have rules for what happens when a person gets shot by a weapon meant to shoot a starship?
We deliberately try to keep the differences between the starship combat and the character-to-character combat sort of like separate. These are separate issues. It is super difficult to target a single person when you've got a artillery laser barrage from your starship. They're very far away. They're on a planet, and you're not. You're in space. So you can't necessarily just shoot a single person. But if you, even if it's just completely what's the word I'm looking for? Inaccurate. So we basically say that, and we sort of talk around a little bit about like when maybe a smaller ship in atmosphere shooting things down, you're going to blow up. If you're going to shoot at a place because you want to get the information inside of it, you're going to shoot this facility man. You're going to destroy everything and the information you need and all the treasure. And what's the point of you doing that? That's where all the adventure was. You just blew it up. We do have a vague guideline that says if it happens, you need to do it, multiply it by 10 or divide by 10 or whatever. If you're a person with a regular gun shooting a starship, also not a great idea because if you get a dinky laser pistol, it's not going to really do much to a big starship. There's a guideline, but we basically sort of also say, keep them separate if possible. There's
a reason that no one tried to shoot Darth Vader with a starship gun, right? It's just not. Darth Vader's either in a starship, which case it's starship combat, or he's up in your face with a lightsaber, in which case you don't have time to aim an entire starship at him. That is, for the most part, those are not the stories we're interested in telling. Yeah. But if there is some guideline in there so that if, for whatever reason, the wave motion gun is pointed at your character's face, you can guesstimate what level of dead you're at.
See, I liked up until then that you were being really kind in assuming it was the player characters that were getting to shoot the starship gun, whereas my players are more worried about what I'm going to do to them.
Well, that's another legitimate reason to try and keep these things separate, right? The Starship systems, that's not to say that we may not come up with some monsters that are on Starship scale, right? That's another sci-fi trope. The Doomsday device from Star Trek is basically a monster on Starship scale. We may well do that, right? The right kind of gargantuan outsider dragon might well be a Starship scale critter, but you guys will just have to wait and see what we do with that.
Alien Archive.
And later products.
In later products.
Yeah.
But starting in Alien.
Because Alien Archive.
Because Alien Archive.
I'm going to say Nex wants to know, will any classes be especially suited to crafting?
No. The crafting system is super simplified.
Yeah.
There are some skills that you need to craft. If you have enough ranks, if you have ranks in that skill equal to the level of the item you want to craft, and you have the money for it, and you have time, congratulations, you crafted it. That's it.
Woo.
So and it's for make magic items, it's mysticism. So if you are a soldier and you have decided to invest in ranks and mysticism so that you can make weapon infusions to bolt onto your sword, enjoy. There's nothing holding you back.
It's time and money.
Yeah, time, money, and skill ranks. That's it.
Yeah, it's good. There's an advantage though. It's not just you get the thing. It's basically might as well. Why didn't I just go out and buy it? You do get an advantage when you craft something yourself. I believe it's basically the hardness and the number of hit points. And
it's easier to repair.
And if it gets broken, you can repair something you have made easier.
But and the other answer is, why don't I just go out and buy it? Space is big. If you think it's a long walk out your front door and down the block to the neighborhood grocery store, that is peanuts compared to space. So if you find yourself on an alien planet that is full of ice giants, and you and your group decided to make yourselves the ice weasels, and you all decided to carry cold guns, and that turns out to have been a terrible decision, being able to say, hey, I've got a lot of ranks in engineering, we've got some Starship fuel, we've got some unused UPVs, universal polymer bases, that's what almost all technology is based on. I'm just going to make some flamethrowers. That way you don't have to go back into the Starship, get up out of the planet, go into the drift, fly back to wherever the nearest place to purchase stuff is, which takes days, get it, fly back, and then hope that the giants that insulted your hat are still right where they were so you can find them and shoot them. You can instead just take a couple days and make flamethrowers.
What were you thinking wearing that hat?
Now, I'm not insulting his hat. I'm saying that if ice giants insulted his hat, he'd want to kill those ice giants, right? I assume he has a targeted, measured response. I actually like that. Yeah, it's a good hat.
You wouldn't be you without your hat, Parham.
Ryan, you monster, how dare you?
So we've talked about a lot about what it's like to be a player for Starfinder and getting ready from that angle. There are a lot of panicked GMs out there wondering how they're going to get a Starfinder game. So what is the most important things a Starfinder GM needs to know compared to their Pathfinder equivalent?
We are putting out an adventure path. Buy it. That's the most important thing you need to know. That was seriously my answer.
What?
If you want something else,
I was going to also add on, there'll be a number of Starfinder Society scenarios out that are also great adventures. If you need adventure content, you can have it on day one. If you're a GM that wants to make one's own adventure, what you need to know about the rules, basically what Owen had said, sort of like, go through that tactical chapter. You'll know the difference between Starfinder and Pathfinder, so you don't accidentally do something Pathfinder and Starfinder. And if you do, it's not necessarily going to break the game. If you happen to give someone, I don't know, do the charging rules slightly differently, it's the math. The math is important, of course. But if you do it for one session, go back and look at it, and you can correct it for next time. But if you want to make your own adventures, go reread your favorite science fiction book. Go rewatch your favorite science fiction movie, and steal plots from that. I mean, that's what we sort of like. A general GM advice is always file the serial numbers off of something.
If it's good enough for Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven and Samurai 7 and Battle Beyond the Stars, then that plot line is good enough for you.
Sure.
If you can get both the Hidden Fortress and Star Wars off of a plot, then it's good enough for you. One of the reasons that we made Pathfinder monsters as compatible as we could with Starfinder monsters is that if you want to, whip out a Pathfinder adventure, put the word star in front of everything, do better than that. But I mean, so you are at a star port and you need to go stop star pirates who happen to mostly be star orcs who have some star gold. You get a thesaurus and do a better job than I just did, but you can do that. Since we have gods and curses and magic, as well as cyborgs and blaster cannons and the internet, infospheres for us, you can take nearly any Pathfinder adventure plot, use the same monsters, a little tweaking, give everybody a laser pistol, and go. Also, seriously, I did a streaming Twitch game that's not hard to find. Jason did a Starship Adventure that you can find online. We did some playtests. Yeah. If you want to see what the game looks like in play, if you're the sort of person that picks the stuff up better by watching it be played rather than playing it, some of those things are out there. There are several hours worth of gaming that you can watch and get a feel for how the flow of things works. And with that as a basis, then you can go look at the Starships chapter or the tactical rules and already have a better idea. he also mentioned Pathfinder Society. If you want to play some before you run a game, go play some Starfinder Society. I'm sorry, play a few Starfinder Society scenarios and get some gaming under your belt. That is always how I find it easiest to learn a game, is to play with some people.
Yes, but it's not like a fantasy game. We don't all have an uncle who can just teach us Starfinder.
My uncle and I worked out Pathfinder D&D together, thank you very much. But, I mean, part of Starfinder Society's goal is to try and provide everyone with a metaphysical uncle who can help you figure out the game. That is part of the community aspect of it. And if you've got questions, right, we'll have a rules forum. We've got all the online forums. Anyone watching this clearly has an internet connection. Come to paizo.com and ask your question. Generally speaking, someone will give you the right answer.
I am writing metaphysical uncle for a blog title idea.
I will say it's always been a life goal to be the uncle that teaches D&D to some kid.
I got to teach my nephew how to play role-playing games, so I feel like I passed it along. Now, it didn't take for him like it did for me, but that's because, unlike me, he is a smart kid that has other life choices.
See, we got... okay. Sorry,
we have so many questions.
Yeah, we've got...
Actually, I should point out, it's been an hour, which is all we really asked you to commit to. Are you gentlemen both available to go a little longer?
Sure.
Yeah, we can go a little bit.
Thank you very much.
Because if I leave, the computer leaves. So
yeah. Well, I can get on my computer.
It's true.
And sound like a robot.
We're good. We're honestly good.
Okay, good.
Okay, so...
Go ahead.
Okay, now that we know... Where's the part where they give you all their money? What products should they be looking to get in order to be ready to play Starfinder that's going to be available at launch?
There's the core rulebook.
Mm-hmm.
There's the first there's Incident at Absalom Station, which is the first adventure in the Dead Suns adventure path. There is, for free, as we mentioned, First Contact, which has some monsters in it, so that's useful. Mm-hmm. There are going to, I'm pretty sure, be other free blog things. There is a combat tracker, which has a combat tracker for Starship combat phases on the back. It's not mandatory, but it can be useful. The pawns are going to be available at launch, aren't they?
Just the core rulebook pawn collection?
We have a core rulebook pawn collection, and the reason I mention that is that one of the things some of my friends have panicked about is I don't have enough science fiction figures, and I sure don't have enough rats and powered armor. Okay, fair. So we do have a pawn collection, which is just like the Pathfinder pawns. You'd have to buy a bag of stands if you don't have 8 million stands already sitting around your house.
But we have Starfinder-themed branded ones, too.
Yes, we do. So. You can buy Starfinder bases if that's useful. They're just bases. But the point is, that's a way to get the necessary miniatures. We've got a basic terrain map.
Right.
If you want to have something that has it's got a metal grid looking on one side, so if you want a hangar bay or the mean streets of your equivalent of Blade Runner, right, whatever it is, we have that.
On the other side is sort of a deserty kind of planet sort of terrain. And then we also
would look very familiar to Matt Damon.
And then we also have the flip mat hex grid for Starship combat, which I believe has some fun like nebula-looking things on one side, and then blank empty space on the other.
There will be Pathfinder scenarios, or Starfinder. I'm sorry, more than a year, and I still get it wrong. There will be Starfinder scenarios from the Starfinder Society if you want the game content, as he mentioned. Are we going to do Starfinder dice? Do you know?
I don't know about that, but the Starfinder GM screen
will
be out if you need that, and it's lovely. And a Starfinder player character folio for your player character. It's got folders and what you know from the player.
We took a really serious look at that to be like, how much room do you need for laser guns? How much room do you need for feats? How much room do you? We tried to make sure that it was actually the most useful version of a player folio we could come together with, and that in the GM screen. There are a lot of conversations about what info should go on here.
Oh, and if you're into Starfinder Society, the player character folio does have a section dedicated, like maybe a half a page or so, dedicated to Starfinder Society stuff. So
and we have Starfinder condition cards.
And the condition cards. Oh, the condition cards.
We have the conditions are very, very similar, but they're not exactly the same. And instead of a fantasy goblin, they have a space goblin with a bowl helmet and a set of armor and a ray gun. As the art, but they've got the correct Starfinder conditions, which, I mean, honestly, I always think I know what all the conditions are because I've been doing this for so long, but the condition cards are just useful, especially since you don't forget, right? You're sickened. Here's a card. You can put it next to you, and you're like, I'm going to, oh, no, I've got this penalty. I'd better not.
And the
You can also fling a condition at a player violently. Like, yeah,
Yes.
you're sickened now, buddy.
We have a question that actually relates to that. When... Okay, I can't...
Flinging cards?
No, the release products.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot find who asked that. I will correct that
I believe
later.
it was Donato Classic, if it's the one I'm thinking of. With the initial AP volume, Starfinder Society scenarios require anything other than core. Is that the one you're talking about, Baron?
Right. Are they going to be able to play the AP that launches day one, or as is, or will they need to wait for the Alien Archive to use it?
No, you can play that on day one. Any creatures that aren't anywhere else, or like the Pathfinder AP, there's a bestiary in the back. So we have a whole bunch of new stat blocks. And then I believe for stuff like that was in the First Contact, we reprinted the stats for them and maybe adjusted them a little bit because that was early going. So you can grab that. You'll have everything you need to know to run the first adventure. You'll have a whole bunch of information on Absalom Station. You'll get some relics of old Galarian on there for some new fun magic items.
Yep, one of the 7 machine guns of sin is in that book.
Yes, it is. The 7 swords of sin.
Yeah, but they're machine guns now.
Remember now. Are they all machine guns or is just the one?
We only talk about the one.
We only talk about the
One of them might be a plasma
machine gun
cannon.
of gluttony.
Yeah.
Is now
It
a
eats
thing.
ammo.
And then you'll get a whole bunch of new monsters in the back, and plus a page on a new world, which we'll be doing every volume of Adventure Path.
Yeah, Codex of Worlds.
Codex of Worlds. We'll have just sort of like a nice information about where it is, gravity, size, and all that, and then like a page of history and whatnot, what's important about it.
Yeah, that falls into that space is big category.
Yeah.
We want to give you things that you... So, if someone has a drift mishap and they drop into real space and you just want them to be some weird place they've never heard of, we want to give you that info. Now, once Alien Archive is out, our products will assume you have it because it is our bestiary, It will be core. Until it is out, we are aware of what products we were putting out beforehand, and we wanted to make sure that you are able to play those without it. Rob McCreary may be bald by the time we're done as a result of having to make this work. It was a Herculean effort, and I'm very impressed with what he's pulled off. But we do have adventures that have in them what you need in them. And then...
the same goes for the Starfinder Society adventures.
Starfinder Society stuff.
Generally, the Pathfinder Society adventures publish the stat blocks that you need in the appendix anyway. They're doing the same thing.
But Rob has such luscious hair. Are you really denying the world Rob's hair by making him bald?
I'm not. No,
He's
that's
tearing
Rob.
he's
Yeah,
just
it's
tearing it
out
out.
himself.
He's doing it to himself. Okay.
Yeah.
The Star Chamber is littered with his old follicles.
So now, here's an experience I had more often than I'd like with Warhammer 40k. I would spend a lot of time customizing something that there was not an official miniature or whatever for, and then they would make an official miniature for it, and I felt like I wasted my time. So when I'm about to play Starfinder, what should I be focusing my crafting time on to make sure that I have like a stand-in, because something that will be useful might be further down the pipeline?
Well, I mean, you can never have enough robots, right? We're going to have security droids and stuff everywhere. Ninja Division, one of our partners, are putting out some pre-painted figures, and there may even be some announcements on the blog about those, but there are pictures of them out, so you can... They're doing the Iconics, and they're doing some Starships.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you are going to have a mechanic and you want a mechanic's drone, those drones are very customizable. So we will never get to every possible combination of combat drone, flying drone, stealth drone, what weapon do they have, what arms do they have, what gear do they have, etc. Same thing with things like weapon and infusions and armor upgrades, right? If you decide you are going to play a Solarian in light armor with a jetpack and a quick draw holster, those specific things we are not likely to get to that exact combination. So the more you want to detail the little things that are on your character, the less likely we are to get to it. I bet a bunch of people are going to be doing Yosoki and Vesk. I made some custom Vesk for playtesting purposes, figures, for example. But unlike in Warhammer, where there's a sort of discrete number of likely combinations, if you've got a Space Marine and he's a Space Wolf, chances are he's got a wolf hide and one of the following weapons from his codex. We have a lot more possible combinations and a lot fewer restrictions because we're a role-playing game instead of a war game. So just whatever you pick up that you like, chances are we're not going to get to a figure that's a perfect representation of that anytime soon.
I would add on to that the starships are also just pretty customizable as you level up and get more stuff for them. So you could always trick out your party's starship in such a way that it looks like the one you've made in the game.
Yep.
Well, speaking of customizing your starship, chat seems to have just suddenly become obsessed with, do we get sentient starships?
So you're as a player, as a party, your starship will have a computer on it. Everyone comes with a basic computer. Whether or not that has a sort of like a synthesized a personality on it or not, it could be up to you and your GM, and you can always have it sass back at you if you like.
Yeah.
But we don't have fully sentient starships that work on their own as of yet.
And one of the reasons for that is that an artificial personality is something we define, and it's basically a super version of Siri, right? You can talk to it can talk back to you, and people have been working on these things for hundreds of years, and they can have second-generation and third-generation programming where computers are programming computers. So it might have 50 billion possible combinations of things to say to you, and the conversation feels very natural. It seems to have a personality, but that is not a sapient creature. That is an advanced version of a chat program. And one of the reasons for that is you can own a computer. You can own a starship. Most people don't want to own people. And if it is a sentient, sapient being, it's a person. So we might well get into that sort of thing at some point. But our assumption is, yes, you can have a computer and it can have a cute nickname and it can give you guff as you get into it because you've done something stupid. But that is just it learning that you react in a certain way when you do something stupid, and it's got a big program that says, your independent rogue trader may do one of the following 20,000 stupid things. If so, give it one of these responses indicating that you think it was pretty stupid.
I like that you can be stupid on a scale from 1 to 20,000.
Well, I can. Not everyone can hit those upper 5-digit stupid levels. But
I'm pretty sure I've been 19,000 stupid before.
I'm willing to admit that.
All right, I want to make sure we get some questions from people that haven't had a chance to ask yet. So, N7 Starkiller, what is the benefit of hex-based starship rules versus grid-based?
What we have with our starship combat is which way your starship is facing is very important because you'll have where guns on certain parts of your ship, shield quadrants on certain parts of your ship. So where you're facing and where you get shot and where you can shoot and where you can move to is important, and it's a lot. I don't know, it's just a lot more fluid to have 6 faces instead of just the 4, where you're just turning 90 degrees every single time. Doing that sort of, 60 degrees? How many degrees is in a hexagon?
Degrees.
60 degrees. 6 times 6 is 360. Okay, so yeah, so you get a lot more interesting things you can do on a hex grid than on a 1-inch square grid.
The only reason the square grid has become very common in role-playing games is that a lot of role-playing games are set either in a dungeon or in a town or in a building, and those places frequently have a lot of 90-degree angles because that's how humanity tends to build stuff. So it's very useful to be able to have a straight corridor that you align with the square grid. We don't currently have plans for giant starship-scale hallways floating through space. So the ability to have one hex of movement be one hex no matter which direction you're going or how you turn better represents the fluidity of no barrier combat than a square grid where you have to worry about the 1 for 2, and then if I go straight 5, then I do one diagonal, and then straight 3, and then another diagonal, is that my second diagonal. It's just more of a pain, and there's no benefit to doing it the other way because we don't have a lot of straight walls floating in space.
Speaking of a pain, how does the planes in space work compared to the flight rules of Pathfinder?
We've simplified it. We have basically, we're working with a flat plane because we can't produce 3-dimensional grid maps, flip mats. And we say you can if you, to sort of simulate essentially any 2 ships on this hex grid are on their own plane, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the third ship is on the same plane if you want to describe it differently. So we have you can basically, if you like, do moves where you pass, quote unquote, pass through a enemy starship's hex, And that's basically you're flying over, you're flying under them, you're not flying through them and crashing into them like we talked about earlier. So we've simplified it, but we give a nod to the sort of three-dimensionality of the way the way you would fly in space.
We don't want to turn Starfinder into a role-playing game and a complicated, advanced war game. I mean, I've been asked, are you all keeping track of momentum? No, we consciously choose. What about the director of thrust? No, these are things we have consciously chosen not to ask people to get out graphing calculators to figure out if I am going 450,000 kilometers forward and I add thrust both at 20 degrees and at 40 degrees at 50,000 tons of thrust and 60,000 tons of thrust, what direction do I end up going, and can I spin my ship so that even though I thrusted that way, I turn off my thrusters, then I rotate 40 degrees? That looks great when they do it on B5. It is not something that most role players want to spend time worrying about when what they want to know is, can I scream, Yahoo, good job, kid? That's what we're trying to get to.
Can Director of Thrust be my title on the ship, though?
Sure,
Yes,
pick any title,
yes.
absolutely.
Techno Trooper 3 has a question about simplification. Are there any rules in Starfinder that could also be used to streamline or improve Pathfinder play?
I don't know exactly. You could use, if you wanted to streamline all of the combat maneuvers, which we have done. You could take ours, and I think you can pretty much maybe use them kind of close.
So here's the thing. A lot of stuff like Afflictions, and as we talked, Monster Creation, and some other things, we borrowed from things like Pathfinder Unchained. Mm-hmm. So there are already Pathfinder versions of some of those rules. There are other things we did where we were consciously trying to keep the total number of options boiled down, but that means that we carried that throughout everything, right? So when you're talking about combat options, we have different ways of doing things than combat maneuver bonus and combat maneuver defense, but it does not scale exactly the same way CMB and CMD did. So if you adopt it, anything from Pathfinder that is CMB and CMD, you kind of have to discard and see if we have created a Pathfinder equivalent version, or figure out the math yourself so that you can do an adaptation. There are absolutely ways you can make that work, but it's going to be a fair amount of work. Whether it improves it or not is a matter of personal taste. Yeah. For every rule, there are some people that prefer doing the additional complexity with the additional options and the different levels of granularity, and there are going to be people who think that that is one rule too far and we should get rid of it. You could rewrite the game so that there were 3 and only 3 things that provoke attacks of opportunity, which is what we did in Starfinder. But if you did, that means that any ability that was balanced against you can do this, but it provokes an attack of opportunity, you have changed the balance. When we're writing a whole new game, it is easy for us to do that as we run. If you are adapting it to another game, you have to decide how you're going to handle options like that.
Runeg asks, have you gone out of your way to avoid trap options in character building?
As much as possible.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay, mostly Joe wants to know about star magic. And more specifically, if there is actual space-themed magic added to the spellcasters.
Oh, certainly, yeah. We have a spell called Gravitational Singularity. A spell that is, what did we call it? Shadowy Fleet, which does sort of creates a shadow illusion of a fleet of starships that rains down. This is, I guess, one point where starships do shoot at player characters, but it's a spell, illusionary one. So that's what other fun?
Is that in core?
Yeah, Shadowy Fleet.
Cool.
It's one of the ones Amanda wrote. I was trying to think. There are a number of them that are fun, that are nice and space themed. Those are the only 2 I can think of off the top of my head.
And spells are a place where again we will probably expand the game when you can look at the number of spells in Pathfinder beyond what's in the core. Our first concern was to make sure that we covered all of the sort of function niches that we need to have covered for the game to make sense. And again, we're cramming a lot of stuff into this game. I mean, it's a full role-playing game like Pathfinder, plus it is a campaign setting primer like the Inner Sea World Guide, plus it has to have a war game in the forms of the Starship rules, which we made as un-war-gamey as we could and still have it serve its function. That is basically 3 books worth of stuff we've crammed into 1 book. So I would love to have had another 100 pages of spells and feats and other options. We tried to make sure that we both had enough for the game to be robust and fun. But it's easy to look at it and think to ourselves, we really should have done more with whatever we're talking about. And that's one of the reasons why we think we're going to have a lot of exciting releases coming out as things proceed forward.
Ask a Pathfinder wants to know, with Galarian gone, where's Robogug?
Galarian's gone.
Yeah, Galarian's gone.
So where's Robocog?
That's my new children's book. Look
Oh.
for it in September. It's
so
like
easy
Where's
to find
Waldo,
Robocog
but
on every
way more
page.
hard.
It's like Where's Waldo, but you're checking utterly destroyed cities.
Yes. Where's Robocog? He was here. He's gone now. Is the answer to every page. I've given it away. That book is canceled. Goodbye.
All right, I'm trying to find the best question of what's left to wrap things up with. Hobbit Sauron wants to know, can you make tea with a wave motion gun?
Are you just laughing at that username?
Well, so first of all, Hobbit Sauron is my wife, LJ Stevens. That is her official job title at Rogue Genius Games, and that question comes from an animated short called Yusei Yamato, which was done by Robert Aspirin and Phil Folio, and shown at conventions back in the 80s. And at one point, and it's a redub of Star Blazers, and at one point, the Yamato is in a dock which is being filled with water, and someone suggests that maybe they fire the wave motion gun, and the response is, fire the wave motion gun, we'll be killed. Killed, we'll be boiled in our boots. And the engineer in the background says, would the captain like to make tea with the wave motion gun? Again, not a core option, but we might get to it later.
I just want to point out something. Let's see. Beamer's RQ in chat says that you're sweeping it under the Rova rug.
No comments.
On that note, is there anything?
This interview's over.
Is there anything that you think we should have covered that just has not been covered up till now about getting ready for your first Starfinder session? We've covered a lot of ground.
There are a lot of people who got into this hobby way before Pathfinder and have been through 8 and 9 and 12 and 50 different role-playing games, and they've got a system for getting into it, and I think they're all going to be fine. There are also a lot of people who have gotten into gaming through Pathfinder one way or another, and they've never really had to make a jump to another game. We love you all. We did our very best to make the path gentle.
We got you.
And if you get it wrong for the first 5 game sessions, it doesn't matter. You'll pick it up. It's just like anything else. It's just like when I thought alchemists could only throw bombs 20 feet total because it said it had a range of 20 feet instead of saying it had a range of increment of 20 feet. Yeah. I got that wrong for the first 4 levels of my alchemist character. Everyone pointed and laughed at me, and then we moved on. A mistake is not the end of the world.
Relax.
Also, they gave your alchemist a
and
wipe
have fun.
So, how about people that want to play Starfinder? So I believe the earliest they'll be able to do it at this point is Gen Con?
That's right. Come at Gen Con. If you're at Gen Con, come by our booth, pick up the game. We're going to have a secondary point of sale up near the Sagamore Ballroom for just buying Starfinder. Or if you can't come to Gen Con, we'll miss you. But go to your local gaming store and pick it up there.
And I know a lot of people are upset because all of the Starfinder events were sold out. We still have quests, so that's an opportunity to do short little scenarios. We've got tables that are running you through 5 of them. That's actually a fair amount of gaming. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be pickup games that aren't scheduled things. People are going to want to play this, so there will be opportunities.
Excellent. Well, I know you guys have been thinking about Starfinder quite a bit for the last couple of years, but I still want to thank you for just the lightning quick answers that you guys, you were just layering them one on top of the other. I couldn't ask you questions fast enough. We covered a lot of ground in this episode, and I think people are very well informed now about what to expect from Starfinder on their first day. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, and for that matter, all the service that you do for the industry.
I'll go on.
Okay, I will. So you record all these seminars. I'm sorry.
Okay. Now, before we let you go, is there anything you guys want to draw attention to that doesn't have to be Starfinder related? This is your chance to shout out and promote anything you want.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything I'm recording on this.
You're not going to promote? Okay.
No,
well, that's fair.
Not here.
That's fair.
Not wearing my Paizo hat, no.
Yeah, not wearing your Paizo hat. Well, let's do this. Check out, Starfinder Society, what is it? Adventure number 3, I wrote.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, cool. Check that out. I had a fun time with that one. And then look for our names also, too, for later on in the Dead Sun's Adventure Path that we have both written things.
Yeah, where our names are going to show up in the credits fairly often.
Yeah.
I will dance around what he was dancing around. Paizo has made arrangements for there to be some solid third-party support from numerous different publishers. So we know we can't put out everything you could possibly want soon enough. A lot of these people are people who freelance for us, and some of them were play testers, and some of them got some material to help them produce these things. So I'm not telling you have to buy third-party content. Whether you want to or not, that's up to you. But be aware it'll be out there. I have seen some of it, and I think some of it will be of very high quality.
Excellent.
I've heard talk of some of these things. Maybe we'll mention them in the shoutouts.
Right. Okay. And
We can't stop.
right. And they'll see. You'll both be at Gen Con?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
We'll both be at Gen Con. I will probably be at the booth occasionally. We both have a fair number of seminars. I will also be at the ENnie Awards for anyone that's going to that. We don't have a formal place set up to sign books, but we will probably all be carrying Sharpies.
Yeah.
So if you want your book signed, hunt one of us down. And I might do a social media thing where I say, hey, I'll be at X place. Come if you want to get your book signed. So
Yeah, and I'll be at the Paizo booth when I'm not at seminars.
yeah.
Also, if you are going to Gen Con and you expect to get signatures, bring your own Sharpie.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just-
What do I do?
And you want more than just black. Get a gold Sharpie or a silver Sharpie.
Especially
good call.
for that, especially for the Starfinder core rulebook in interior plates.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. We will be right back with Param, some banter.
Banter.
All right, we'll be right back with banter right after this. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
Having carefully told him we could do this.
And we're kind of back now.
What does that mean?
We're back. We're back.
We're back, okay. In the banter segment, Param and I talk about whatever we feel like. We don't really have anything prepared. I've got a couple of thoughts on my latest session of Hell's Rebels, but otherwise, Param, how is your game going? What are your thoughts on Pathfinder lately?
Oh
Or
gosh.
Starfinder? It's coming.
Well, Pathfinder Society has gotten just crazy over here on my end, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. I'm finally settling into my role as venture officer or venture agent. I guess that's a type of venture officer. Yes, I'm saying the accurate things for my store, and we're trying to get ready for the retail support program, and more importantly, we even started work on getting store shirts, because one of the options in the new society guide was that you can have a local shirt for your club, and that counts as a shirt, but only at your club. So we
How does that work?
Well, we ordered it. We had some commissioned an actual artist and paid them actual money, because that's what you're supposed to do with artists. I negotiated a fair price and paid them half in advance, and then gave them sketches and stuff of my really bad artwork, and then they turned it into really cool artwork. In fact, I might be able to show it on the show in a minute whenever I get a chance to go bring it up, because I didn't intend on bringing this up, so I can go get that and probably throw it up on screen for a second, at least part of the artwork. And then I contacted a company, Vistaprint, and got a corporate account set up, so that this was super important for me. For a small gaming club especially, we don't want to be handling people's money. I don't want people paying me money so that I can go order a shirt at cost and then bringing it back and then saying, who paid me who? Did you pay for the shirt? I don't remember you paying for the shirt. Did I pay for the shirt? I lost my wallet. Where'd all the money go? This is all nightmare scenarios for me, especially since we try to make everything as easy at the club as possible. So I set up a corporate account through Vistaprint so that I could offer the shirt at cost. We're not making profit off the shirt. That's very important. And then go in and order it, and then order them darn selves and get it shipped to them, and I don't have to worry about that. And it's been really fun. The whole process of going through and playing publisher for a couple of days, when I know how all that works, because I get to work alongside a lot of great publishers. It made this process very fun and easy. Because, hey, I know how to negotiate for art, and that was interesting. A lovely artist, Gladys Nichols, did the artwork for it. She turned it around super quick. And
I feel like I know Gladys.
on my Facebook
We are
a lot.
friends on Facebook. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I don't believe we've met in person, but I've seen her posts.
Yeah, she is a fledgling artist that I'm trying to prod into being a professional artist, but you know how that goes. And I did the commissioning blind, poked a lot of different artists, and you know how that works. So we got a piece of art. I did a logo for it. We put the logo on the art and we sent it out for shirts, and that's gonna be fun. And our group has just gotten so big. We had over 20 people showing up for the last game. We had to split into 3 tables. We could barely fit the people in the room, which is now going to become a logistical problem of we're running out of physical space and the fire marshal might need to talk to us. And beyond that, we split into 3 tables and then filled all the tables. If another person had walked through the door, I would have had to say, sorry, you can't play Pathfinder today, and that would have broken my heart. Because we try to get every single person that wants to play in there. I'm so lucky to have 4 very talented GMs who can step up at a moment's notice and get ready to play. And we've put the game plan together now, where the 2 regular GMs are always ready to go. The 3rd GM has a scenario prepped in his back pocket so that they can go, right there, get it out there. And the 4th GM, that's going to be fun when that happens, so I don't really know how we'll handle that situation. And we're trying to ride the balance of, man, you're going to play 50% of the time, but we need you to know the scenario 100% of the time, so you're going to have to play ignorant. You know, how you just you have to play like you don't know the adventure. Every GM in society knows how this is, because occasionally you're going to have to play an adventure that you've GM'd before, or vice versa.
I have only been an informed GM playing ignorant once, and at that point, an informed player. Anyway, I've played in a scenario that I've GM'd before only once, and at that point, it's more fun just watching the other players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless something terrible is coming, and then you just want to look away.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It is actually a lot of fun when you're kind of in the know and the GM knows you're in the know, but you're just being really dumb on purpose. And I'm not helping. There's an obvious trap down here, but I'm encouraging you to open the door because my character would do that right now. And yeah, it's great. It's something also you have to be a really responsible player, a really good GM. And if you're a good GM that's done this a long time, you know what you hate your players doing to you, so you know not to do that to your GM, I hope.
Yeah, but so the bigger struggle is when you remember the way you played it the first time, or you remember what you would have done, and you would have had the solution. And then it's like, not only do you have to play ignorant, you have to play a little dumb. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets a little challenging because, it's just sometimes you would have known what to do.
Right. I just usually, this goes back to the GM PC. At that time, I'm just pretend I'm a GM PC that happens to not be GMing. So that I can just I'm a sidekick. You all make these big decisions, and a lot of that's really hard because when I'm in a role playing game, I'm a very alpha personality at the tables. I'm trying to push the role playing. I'm trying to push the adventure, get the most out of the situations. So what I try to do anyway, and especially in these sorts of situations, is I'm poking the other players, saying, "Hey, what are you doing right now? Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, big old half orc with the 2-handed sword, what do you think about the magical library?" No? Nothing? Well, maybe you should try, because I'm not allowed to. But the biggest thing is we're just growing so huge, and I'm just not sure how to handle all these players. We were talking about it to the point where we used to know every single person by name and everything they liked, and knew what kind of characters they liked to play, and we were a really close-knit group, and we're reaching the point now where I don't know all the people that show up anymore. I don't know all their names. And we have over 20 show up, but not everybody shows up. So right now we're probably looking like 30, 35 total members of the crew now that just show up, at a semi-regular rate. And I don't know them all anymore, so that's also really weird.
Bastille in chat says you need to build a club hall. You personally. Yeah, make it like your tavern, but big enough
Bigger.
for at least 40, let's say 80 people. Let's say you're going to more than double in the next
So we're
month.
just going to have Hobbit Con over here, right?
Go on.
I can't. No, I'm not doing that again. It took me way too many years to build this, and I thought it was only going to take me 6 months. That was
But now that you've made it, you can just churn those out.
Oh, yeah, right. No. I'm never doing this again. That's the reason it's mobile. So I never
Right.
have to do this again. You keep talking, I'm going to drive this thing up to Canada.
So on the topic of building halls and whatnot, I did have a brainstorm for a gaming store that I will never open. But were I to open a gaming store, this is the idea I had. And we briefly talked about it, Param, because I mentioned that I wanted a gaming store with a ceramic cafe model.
Right.
And nobody in our No Direction chat knew what I was talking about, which surprised me. But Anthony knew what that was as a plaster fun time. So listeners may have a better idea what I mean by a ceramic cafe. But basically, it's picture a cafe. You can go there, you drink coffee. But instead of whatever you would normally do, play cards, talk, whatever, you can also buy a ceramic piece, a plaster piece, and paint it. And they will supply you with the paint supplies, but you do have to pay a fee to take up the space, to take up one of the tables. And then you get unlimited access to their resources, and you also get an informed staff. So what I like about this is that I don't paint miniatures like I used to. When I was a 40K player, I could just like churn out several miniatures in a week. And if I needed a new, Pathfinder, or at the time D&D miniature, absolutely no problem. I had the resources for it. I just fit it into my painting schedule. But once painting stopped being a regular thing for me, I found that, a couple of months would go by and I would come back and paints had gone hard, or I thought I had a color and it didn't have it in my collection, or it ran out, and then it didn't exist anymore because Games Workshop at the time was constantly updating their paint lines. And so what started as something that I could just bang out easily now became a struggle to keep up with what resources are available, and just like it became more costly and frustrating. So if a gaming store also had an option where you could rent out a table that included paint and included brushes, and ideally you didn't have to buy a miniature there, since the Bones Kickstarters have filled all of our collections with unpainted miniatures at this point, it would be nice, because then I could be supporting the store in the way that the game store cafe model is supposed to work, where you're there and you're paying to be there by way of ordering coffee. And I would still like that option, but mainly I would just like to put down a small amount of money to borrow paint and not have to worry about actually owning and storing and tracking paint.
Now that sounds like a great idea. And as soon as you explained what a ceramic cafe is, I was like, oh yeah, we have those all the time, but we don't call them cafes. There's no coffee served at these things. There's just the pottery. You sit down and do the pottery, and then you come and pick it up a couple of weeks later after they fire it, and it looks really cool. And I do that very often. It is something I often. It's a great first date activity. Yeah. Now I sound like horrible. I sound like I just have a whole lot of first dates. But moving on. Moving on.
Well, actually, one of the advantages of doing it as a game store is that you don't have to fire the miniature.
Right. They'll just dry.
You leave with it because, it's water-based paint. It will dry while you're there.
Mm-hmm. Now, none of them do that, but what we do at our game store fairly regularly is this is supported mostly by some of the managers and stuff, but mostly just the fans and stuff. We hold paint nights where all the veterans come in and we bring all the tools and the paints and stuff. And then it's just like, hey, show up. We're going to teach you how to paint if you want to learn. If you don't want to learn, you just want to paint some stuff, we'd love to see what you're doing. And it's a great motivator. And I get a lot more done when I'm in this group settings than I do when I'm just piddling around by myself. Because it's a motivated group activity event. And I say that, but then sometimes when I have a paint night and we decide to stream it live on the No Direction Twitch channel, I get very less done because I spend all that time teaching. But in either event, it's a fun time, and it allows for people to paint. And again, this is something that I've talked about occasionally on the show. I live in a financially challenged area, to where I know what it's like to be a gamer who was too broke to afford a lot of gaming, and buying a core rulebook involved months of planning and saving, and then if you keep that thing together in duct tape and a dream until it literally disintegrates into dust because you aren't getting a replacement. And so a lot of us old timer gamers, it's a way to let people who can't afford all the painting and materials to still enjoy that part of the hobby.
Now, this just kind of came to me. This was not part of my original Ceramic Cafe game store pitch, but one of the issues that I had was similar to yours when I was running Pathfinder Society in Montreal, was that I never knew how many people would show up. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you could give people that volunteer to GM a table free access to the painting table. And if their game doesn't go off, they're painting for the next 4 hours. If their game does go off, they get their game in. So that way you can have a core of GMs that are sitting in the store with something to do, and as long as they don't mind tearing themselves, because like they have to commit to playing a game, not to just showing up to paint, so that if they do get the opportunity to game, that will be their priority. But it's not a complete loss if they can't, if not enough people show up to play their game.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an option. That'd be very cool. Most of the time when our GMs can't GM, we just slap them in on a table as a player, so they can play Pathfinder when they're not GMing.
That's
Pathfinder.
True.
And
yeah, but a lot of
our
Montreal's
GMs appreciate
that
because they often don't get to play a lot because they're GMs.
We had a lot of players in our area that played like just all of the first couple of seasons, so 0 and 1, and then when we were restarting it, there was a push to play a lot of the early stuff to kind of get a foundation of Pathfinder Society is. So we had this conflict between the new players that wanted to play the new stuff and the experienced players the new players that wanted to play the old stuff and the experienced players that wanted to play the new stuff. So, it was rare that we had a situation where we can get a good mix of people that all wanted to play the same games.
And this is why replay should always be a thing. But I won't rant that now, but I will point to it hardly.
Yeah, it's not far in the archive that people that want to hear that rant can find it.
Right.
How's your game going?
My Rain and Winter game is going great. I got to use the Wolf and Behir's clothing. Did I talk about that last episode?
No, I think you've only talked about that in private.
Okay. In private or in Private Sanctuary?
I don't think you brought it up in the Private Sanctuary.
Okay. So, random things have happened, and this isn't written in the adventure guide. But at one point in time, let's just say a Behir was involved. And when a Behir gets involved in anything, and then my party decides to charm the Behir, and I roll really badly. So I ended up having to make a custom monster that's a wolf in sheep's clothing, but colossal, and instead of a bunny rabbit, it's a Behir. And when I slapped that mini down on the table, my players weren't prepared that I'd have a mini for this. I did. Hey, wait, we're video. I can just grab it.
Yeah. I've seen pictures of it. There's just like a chunk. Is it all the way there in the back, Bram? On the back wall. There's something that's big enough to be a Behir on a gigantic tree.
No, here's the gigantic tree.
All right.
The gigantic tree.
Very nice.
And the Behir. Yeah, and he goes in like this. He actually fits and slots in.
Oh, Monica's telling me that you did talk about it. Oh no, sorry, that's not Monica. That's Mortundo.
Yeah.
Mortundodas says that you did talk about it. Anyway, talk about it again.
All right. So I got to slap this on the table, which means I actually had to spend a week, and you guys helped. I made the stats for this thing, and it was fun. But it was cool.
So there's a step I'm missing. They charmed a Behir, and then you needed a Behir in sheep's clothing.
Okay,
what happened to the Behir?
Well, they're in a weird magic garden place, and then they might have fed the Behir the wolf in sheep's clothing, which there's rules for that in Pathfinder. And and then I might have exaggerated some of those rules to get a really cool, awesome result. But still, it's not a good idea to feed alien tentacle monsters to other monsters, because then you get most of the Alien franchise is what you get. Yeah, but now they're finally leaving the hut and everything's going to be fun. It's the frozen stars. So small spoiler alert, real quick here. This is the first time they're leaving the planet of Galarian, and that blew their minds. Just like, wait, what? I'm like, yep, you ain't on Galarian no more. This is not Kansas, Toto. Which means I'm going to get one more chance to completely blow their minds, of course. But we're keeping that secret. I really, really hope. Man, you have it how hard it is to hide the worst kept secret in Pathfinder from a group of players that happen to like listening to my show.
And you're sure they don't know? They're
Three
not
of
just being polite.
three of them for sure do not know, because I've scared them off, and the other three I do know because they've been around, and they have been sworn to secrecy.
It's not even a secret. It's a selling point.
I know.
It's like buying a box of cereal and not knowing that there's a toy inside, even though right on the front there's a big star saying toy inside.
But how awesome. Just think about the impossibility of all this impossibility. It's going to be great.
Yep. They're going to love that toy inside.
Yeah.
I had a weird session of Hell's Rebels this
Really?
week. So, we're going to do minor spoilers, but Hell's Rebels Book 3 is what we're starting, and it starts off pretty open, and so, Param, your framing's weird. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it starts pretty open. We get to pretty much decide where we want to go. Now, Hell's Rebels Book 2, in the path that we chose, ended with that aquatic encounter that killed a lot of the PCs. You'll remember that? So this one started with an aquatic encounter, and it feels fairly optional. But it's actually, it's larger than an aquatic encounter. It's an aquatic... Well, I don't know yet. We haven't started yet. I believe it's going to be a dungeon. It might just be a couple of rooms. But there's definitely an aquatic element to this side quest that we're doing. And at first I was like, oh, that's really good far-sighted design. You set up the aquatic encounter at the end of one book so that you've kind of got an idea that this is how the aquatic rules work. So even though this isn't an aquatic campaign, when you get to the second aquatic one, it's going to raise the stakes. And the first one, even though it killed us, was actually, I was thinking, just supposed to serve as a primer for the second one. But here's the weird thing. When we started to use our experience as people that have fought and lost fights underwater, the second encounter wasn't holding up. It's like the second encounter expected the GM to, or not the second encounter, but the aquatic elements of Book 3 expected the GM to hand wave some stuff, like the pressure of the depth and whatnot and getting around. Whereas the encounter in Book 2 did not expect the GM to hand wave it. So it felt like we entered aquatic hard mode, and now we're in aquatic easy mode, and we were never told that switch happened. So we were asking Jeff, our GM, the right questions and trying to make the right preparation. And he was like going through the book, and it's like, yeah, no, none of this is here. None of this stuff matters that you guys are doing. It's great, you're right, but I don't know why it's like this. Now, it didn't help that that Jeff really expected us to take another one of the routes. I don't know why, but like the players, the party, very clearly all agreed that this is the best path to go on. And so he was unprepared for that session, and the book wasn't doing him any favors by not having the complicated rules that you would expect without telling him that it doesn't have the complicated rules.
Yeah, I mean,
plus Matt had just picked up Aquatic Adventures, so he was especially ready for some underwater combat. Like mentally.
That's where your GM really needs to be like I can't fault him on this, but to really get the most out of that, your GM would have also had to been like super into water combat and reading underwater adventures and etc. etc. But this is just a symptom, of course, that the adventure paths are not written by the same person that writes all 6 of them. They do work together. We do know that they talk with each other and coordinate, and the developer is like really instrumental. But this definitely sounds like an area where it was like, I don't care about water. I really care about water.
Well, and there had to be some manner of coordination because the end of the aquatic adventure or segment of part 2 led into the aquatic segment in part 3. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, some paths had to cross. A note had to be exchanged. The developer of the entire adventure path had to make sure some dots connected. And plot-wise they do, but just the mechanical expectations, it was so weirdly disconnected. Mm-hmm. So what we ended up doing is we were just using some aquatic elves as mounts. They volunteered. And the GM's just pretend you have a swim speed, and anytime it doesn't make sense to do something because you're mounted, we'll deal with that then. So yeah, we are riding aquatic elves like they're seahorses.
I'm just imagining,
but actual horses.
I'm just imagining an elf just like flipping up on his feet and doing like a flipper impersonation. Cool. I'll be completely open, man. If my players jumped in the water right now and wanted to do some aquatic adventuring, I'd be like, I don't know. That's for boats, right? No, crap.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but it really is like there's specific details about how this would run that would then complicate things for adventurers of our level to do it. And we did start contemplating, like in character, telling the NPC that was explaining the situation. Okay, it's the depth. It's the thing is specifically stated as being like 400 feet deep, and the aquatic rules are like you start taking pressure damage after 100 feet. Like it gets lethal, and we could not survive that at this level with this equipment and with the equipment that we could afford. And so we in character start explaining to the NPC, we're sorry, we'd love to help you, but we can't. And the GM was just like, yeah, but you're saying the right thing for stupid reasons. Let's work together to hand wave this as a group of players so that we're all having the most fun as players playing these characters, doing the right thing.
Quick, hand out the elixirs of plot convenience.
Exactly. We definitely found a lot of magic items, and of course, our aquatic elf mounts that the adventure did not assume we would have access to.
Were you having fun though? Is Hell's Rebels as fun as most people say it is?
Hell's Rebels is fun, and like that first, part 3, at least for us, started with a meeting where it's like, here's all your allies, and it's like we have amassed a lot of allies, and that's cool. And like he was kind of naming them, and it's like I know all of these NPCs. We've had really personal interactions with them, and anytime we met them, it's like, and this is how we'll use them for the rebellion. And so we were at a meeting where it's like, all right, we can start really putting some plans into motion. It's not just people coming up to us and we're helping them because we want to do a groundswell of support in the city for like the downtrodden. It's like, no, now we are organizing a rebellion. Like there is a rebellion happening here and we are the people that are running it. So the start of the session was great. And then just the aquatic stuff just killed a lot of the momentum of that specific session because it really felt really rulesy and confusing. But it didn't kill the momentum of the campaign. I'm kind of looking forward to this side quest being done so that we can... We took this because the next step of rebelling is being more of an active rebellion. And so this was the greatest opportunity to do this side quest because it's a side quest. We didn't want to start a rebellion and then get distracted by a side quest that's not related to it.
Right.
So it's a little bit of something that we just feel like we need to get out of the way, but at least it doesn't feel too much like a slog right now. It just, hopefully the aquaticness of it in a campaign that I had no expectations would be aquatic, let alone have 2 major aquatic elements to it. I just kind of want this done.
Oh, I understand. And Kintargo is not super aquatic-y, is it? I thought it was kind of landlocked.
Not far from the coast. No, it's So there's sea to the north and mountains to the south.
Okay.
So you're not landlocked as much as you are just kind of cut off from the other cities of Cheliax. That's how the rebellion will not be squashed right away by larger Chelish armies, because by the time word gets out, they've got to either navigate water or mountains. So that's one of the reasons that a rebellion can even happen. And we're taking that opportunity, Param. Just once we deal with some aquatic elves and their problem.
Right.
Yes.
That's all the gameplay I've been doing. That's it. I mean, there is speaking of some Starfinder news, there's been some news that's come out. We put it up on the Facebook post. They are having there's some art previews of the color miniatures that you saw a couple of episodes ago when we got to premiere the black and white art through the computer renders of. Gen Con and Paizo have announced they are going to open up a new set of Starfinder tables. So if you haven't gotten into a Starfinder game, watch closely the event registration page. They said today that they didn't say when they were going to open them up, but they are going to add a bunch of new Starfinder tables to kind of accommodate those games at Gen Con. I know that those sold out literally in seconds. Like literally in seconds.
I think it was literally minutes, but at this point we're really splitting hairs. Yeah, that's the expression, right? Why does that feel so wrong?
Well, they sold out during the wish list processing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I guess if you say minutes or seconds, it doesn't matter. There was no point of interaction between. You had to press that button exactly at 12,
right?
Or else you didn't have a prayer of getting it. And even of everybody that pressed it exactly on the second of release, 3 of my 4 friends did not get in.
Wow.
And
that happened.
Yeah.
That went live during PaizoCon, so I was not far from the Starfinder Society team when they got that news. And you'd think they'd be super happy, but no, they were super worried.
Right.
Because they want Starfinder's first Gen Con to be a major Starfinder event. And if most people's takeaway from it is, I wish I could have gotten in some Starfinder, that's not good for anybody.
Right.
So there was talk of like, we have to find some way to get more people at tables, more people playing Starfinder. And Owen mentioned that there would be quests, which I definitely recommend people check out the quests. It's something that I don't always make my time for when I'm at a convention with quests, and then I usually regret it. It's something that I wish was my first gaming at any given convention, because it's just a fun little thing that builds up to not a major boon, but it builds up to an exclusive boon, and it whets your palate for the weekend of gaming.
And there's a bunch of learn to play Starfinder slots. Now, of course, this might be useless advice given to a lot of our listeners, because we have also gotten news over the last couple of weeks that Gen Con sold out.
Yeah.
It's like there's still some seats left for Thursday and some left for Friday, but Saturday and Sunday are gone at this point.
Sunday too?
Yeah. They got that.
Wow,
email.
I didn't hear that.
And the 4-day passes are completely gone. So you can't go at all on the weekend, and you can't get a 4-day pass at this point. I don't know if there's a way to go to Gen Con at this point, which is why a lot of other controversial issues are popping up, like the issue of lobby conning and things like that have come up in the community, because that convention is just too big at this point. It's completely outgrown its city, and it's starting to really show that it has outgrown Indianapolis.
But it is still locked into Indianapolis until 2021. Is that right?
2021. They had to extend it exactly 1 year. So that tells me that they have a plan for another location, and they needed a gap year.
And Monica's in chat saying that Thursday's about to sell out. When Gen Con made an announcement that Saturday was about to sell out, it still gave people, I feel like, most of that day to make plans and get their tickets. So if they're making that announcement, then I recommend that if you have any plans on attending Gen Con on Thursday, get your tickets now, make your plans now, because by this time tomorrow, they'll be gone.
Right. Jacob Blackman is pointing out that the big reason that it might be selling out is that it's the 50th anniversary. I think that has a little to do with it. I don't think a lot of people care. I think some people do. I think it's just the popularity of tabletop gaming has just exploded these last couple of years. If you look at market growth, like some of the ICV2 numbers, it's like, what, 30-40% growth over
30% in the last year.
Wow.
And I believe it's 30% every year for the last couple of years, or somewhere in that neighborhood.
That growth level is insane for any market. That is like freaking POG level growth, or Magic the Gathering getting launched growth.
And there was no major new release last year. Like nope. Star Wars was a couple of years ago. 5th edition was a couple of years ago. Last year was like for RPGs, tabletop RPGs. Last year was just a skip year.
Right. I mean, we talked about it that year. That was like, man, Gen Con seemed there wasn't a lot of news at all this year because there wasn't. Everything was getting ready for this year, and it still grew like crazy.
So, like, I do kind of. I would have guessed that it's the 50th anniversary is driving up interest in Gen Con, but anytime I think about it, it's like, why would that matter? Because it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of anniversary events, and Dungeons and Dragons is the only thing that I would imagine would have like a legacy. No, wouldn't it? No, did Gen Con start as a wargaming convention?
Gen Con started as a convention in Gary's basement.
Okay.
So in Lake Geneva. So not Gary's basement. It was not his basement. They organized it in a community center. It's been so long since I've. But anyway, it was in Lake Geneva, and it was a lot of wargaming, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like if anyone would take advantage of this being a big anniversary, it would be Dungeons and Dragons, and I haven't heard any cool events that are going on specific for the anniversary or throwbacks or retrospectives or anything. It's really just, it is the 50th anniversary. How about that?
Yeah, they did announce some retrospectives, actually, since you just said that. They announced that this morning, that they were trying to throw a spotlight on some of that. I think a lot of that is D&D has completely pulled out of Gen Con, which is sad. And I know we're a Paizo podcast, but Gen Con without D&D is just sad. The Gen Con's still awesome. It's just
except
really
it's selling out, and it's
Gen Con is
over
fine.
The stadium and
Gen Con is fine without D&D, obviously, but it's just, man, it's like they should be there. It's like peanut butter without jelly. It doesn't work.
I like peanut butter just fine without jelly.
I like jelly.
I'm speaking literally there, though. I know you're speaking metaphorically.
I just want to see the big foam castle.
And like landing in the airport, and there's a beholder waiting for you. Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons did have a cool presence at Gen Con, and I guess that's really why it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of retrospective. Like, first of all, most people going to Gen Con, I think, would rather spend that hour gaming than watching a retrospective video or a retrospective seminar. But also, yeah, without D&D, it's a weird retrospective of like, remember when D&D was a thing attached to Gen Con? It's not anymore. That's weird. The end.
Yeah, I mean, even Games Workshop came back, and they left for a long time. Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be a cool convention. I know most of our listeners aren't going to be able to go, but you'll be able to listen to those seminars here on No Direction.
Do you know how many seminars it's going to be, Param?
Ooh, I do not know. It is nowhere near as many as you all recorded at PaizoCon. I mean, good grief. Well, there's just the one seminar room this year. So, it's always been just the one seminar room. PaizoCon is the outlier. And so I think it's like 20 or so, I think we're going to have. It's about 5 a day. Yeah. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday's a little light, but I still think it's about 20. Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised that so many of the Monday seminars on Paizo were still what I would consider, at PaizoCon, were still what I consider A-list seminars. So yeah, when I was editing them and putting them up, and I got to the Monday ones, it's like, man, there's still really good seminars today. These are ones that I'm looking forward to listening to. Because, I haven't even listened to all the PaizoCon coverage. If anyone has, that's kudos to them.
Now, the Gen Con coverage, some of the best seminars are later in the week. It's not till Saturday that the 2000 something and beyond panel happens, and that's when they do the big announcements. So, I will edit that first, obviously. I do every year, because that's what everybody's going to want to hear right away. It will spoil some of the other seminars, because it'll be like, these things happened chronologically, but then they didn't. And Eric or Lisa is going to be up there saying, and as we announced yesterday, and well, you didn't. But pay attention to our Facebook page, especially, because as news gets announced, we're going to spam that out. Like the second that comes out of their mouths, an announcement is going to be like, and then they announce this, and it'll be up here on our Facebook page.
Awesome. So, I guess you're going to be in charge of the Facebook updates?
Yeah, I have been every year.
I don't pay attention to our Facebook page when I'm at Gen Con.
That's because you're working a booth.
I know.
You've become the man.
Among other things. I am the man. Tina calls me a Gen Con rock star.
Mm. And hey, if you want to see us, we'll be at Gen Con. Brian's gonna be at the Blind Ferret booth, right?
That's right. Probably the same booth number as last year. Let me see if I can find that.
You'll see me a lot at the seminar room. Not as much as last year, because we got a couple of really great volunteers going to be helping us this year. And, we're going to be able to, cover a lot of the seminars. We're not going to get 100% coverage, because we're going to... Well, I made some editorial decisions that maybe the art panel isn't a good thing to record the audio of, because it hasn't been the last few times we've done it. And I don't mean any insult to the art team. It's just I can't point. We won't have live streaming, and that's more of a see it thing.
Okay, we are booth number 2129, which I don't believe is the same booth as last year. Looking at the map, we are almost at the corner. So, there's the main hall, and then there's kind of the second section. And last year, it wasn't far from Pikachu, who was hanging on there. Pikachu just becomes a landmark at conventions because he's hanging from the ceiling. So we're going to be closer to where Pikachu was last year.
Ooh.
So actually pretty far from the Paizo booth. That's the Paizo one. Wow, we're nowhere near the Paizo booth this year.
You were hard to find last year.
Well, me specifically, because I was at the board game bento part of the Blind Ferret booth. The Blind Ferret booth is a gigantic island, and I was a tiny sliver on the right side, but our address was based on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was hard to give people directions. At some point, we were just like, we were across from whatever that pirate-based legacy game that launched last year was. I believe it was, the Plaid Hat booth. So, yeah, we were next to Plaid Hat last year.
All right. Well, that's about all I've got on my end.
Well, you briefly talked about the new miniatures from Ninja Division, but I know somebody on somebody on Facebook was asking for our opinion of them. It's $40 USD for a pack. There's 2 packs of them.
Ouch.
And each one contains so one of them contains 3 miniatures and an iconic ship. One of them contains 5 miniatures, including a drone.
That's a little much. I have to say it. That's $10 more than the same packs from WizKids.
Yep.
For the non-blind box WizKids pack. I know cost of everything goes up, but that's $8 a mini in the most optimistic pack, and that's $10 a mini for the one that just has the 3 in the Starship.
Yeah, and something's gone wrong with some of the colors, especially the aliens, especially the Vesk. Like, if you compare just the iconic pictures on the bottom of the card to how the miniatures are painted,
now,
the Vesk doesn't look right at all.
Are those artistic renders, or is there?
I don't know. It's actually a terrible photo. It's such a weird preview because it showed up. It doesn't seem to be from anyone official. I know Owen shared it, but I don't know if Paizo did. And that site that used to be Pathfinder Miniatures, I believe it's Fantasy Miniatures now, and it covers a lot of Dungeons & Dragons stuff too. They posted just like tiny clips from this preview, But I don't know if they're intentionally not showing off these previews because something's wrong or because they're not final. But if they're not final, why even show this? There's a lot of strangeness to this, and I'm worried that these are not going to be very popular.
Yeah, I hope they do. I hope it's better in person than what I'm seeing here, because the Vesk is teal?
Well, the armor's wrong. The skin color is wrong. Yeah, the skin color is bright teal.
Okay,
And just it looks so flat.
Yeah, there's not any shading. I hope these aren't just. I just hope these aren't representative. That's a high price to ask, especially if they're not the same quality as the WizKid stuff, which is really odd because this is Ninja Division. They make amazing miniatures. I'm not used to.
But do they make pre-painted miniatures?
Ooh, that's a good point.
I have a feeling these are going to be great sculpts, and there was talk when we had Ninja Division representative on the show. There was talk of these later being released unpainted.
That has been confirmed since.
That has been confirmed.
Yes. Yeah.
I think people are better off waiting and painting them themselves.
Mm-hmm. If you've got a hand at painting.
Yes, fair enough. I'm sure there's some people looking at these and they're like, I can never recreate this, but I don't know.
I love painting. I love promoting painting as part of the hobby. It still cost me over $50 to put together a basic painting set when I had to rebuild my supply a couple of months ago. And that's a lot to ask for, an upfront cost. But of course, $40 for 5 miniatures is a lot to ask for an upfront cost too. Especially when you have like the unpainted WizKids ones that are 2 miniatures for $4.
The deep cuts.
The deep cuts that look amazing.
I love the deep cuts. Anytime new deep cuts are revealed, I love just looking through all the preview images. I love how they integrate clear plastic. It kind of came out of nowhere, and it's really stepped up the unpainted plastic miniatures game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the bones, but man, the detail quality on those deep cuts
great, but I'm
so
leaning more
good.
towards bones for monsters and stuff, whereas deep cuts I would use for a PC.
I will use a deep cut for just about anything that they got, honestly, at this point. And monsters are real quick to paint, so a lot of monsters are just dry brushing scales.
Yes, that's true. All right, Param, I think we're about ready to wrap things up.
We are ready to wrap it up.
We will be right back to wrap things up right after this.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 162 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. And thanks once again to our guests, Owen Casey Stevens and Jason Keeley, for just overloading us with Starfinder news and Starfinder information that anyone that is prepping for their first Starfinder game, I have a feeling, will be listening to this episode multiple times just to catch all of the hints that were dropped. Oh, and also thanks for a very active chat with a large variety of questions. We had an outline. We had an extensive outline that we were worried we wouldn't get to. But it was nice having people asking what they were specifically looking for, people that were informed of what has been previewed so they can ask the follow-up questions so that, the questions beyond just the previews. And Owen and Jason were both excellent at filling in the gaps and answering the questions. Really, the Rovagug question was the only one that they were like, we can't answer that for real.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But even the person who asked it knew they couldn't answer that one.
It's true, yeah. We skipped the preface, but it was prefaced with, I know you can't answer this, but where's Rovagug? Before we go, we want to bring your attention to some interesting things. The first couple of bits would be Starfinder related. Owen hinted at this because he couldn't flat out say it.
Well, to be fair, he didn't hint at it at all. It
was Jason that hinted at it. It's true. And Owen was like, but we can hint at it. Or actually, we can flat out tell you about the Starfinder Compendium. So this is a product that's coming out for Rogue Genius Games. And we have to say that Alex Agunas, who works on the network, had a major part in this. He wrote half of it. Is that what he said on the Psychic episode?
I think so.
And he said he doesn't know if the Everyman Gaming which is his imprint. He doesn't know if their logo will be on it or if it'll just be his credit as an author. But Starfinder Compendium will be a major third-party release for people that are interested in Starfinder. And like Owen said, they had access to the rules early, so it's not
and this is
Owen
not
like breaking any rules or taking advantage of a situation. Rogue
Right,
Genius
this-
Games is legitimately one of the major third-party publishers, and as that publisher, they had an opportunity not everyone was afforded.
right. All third-party publishers that had, I believe the rule was, if you were a third-party publisher for Pathfinder and you had a product that actually got published on Paizo.com, you had the opportunity to opt in. I don't know the details of that, but it's not like Owen taking advantage of being Mr. Starfinder rules dude now. It's
Right.
every third-party publisher had this opportunity.
Speaking of not knowing the information or not knowing the details, I don't actually know anything about the Starfinder Compendium other than that it's huge and important, and
Okay.
talented people worked on it.
Yeah, I do know it's going to have converted Starfinder versions of the Wizard, the Paladin. Oh my gosh, I can't remember all the list of classes, but a lot of the classes that don't have obvious analogs in Starfinder are getting versions. I think this is from the announcement, and so, you know, if you need your actual space wizard, that's not going to be a technomancer. He's just a space wizard with space spells, and of course a lot of spells and rules to support that. I know there's a lot more than that. That was just one of the key things I saw on, because it's going to fill a lot of gaps, just being able to do that. Because, hey, you need your space paladins.
Also, I want to bring people's attention to something that I discovered during the conversation today. There's a Starfinder wiki.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It seems like it's run by the same people that do the Pathfinder wiki.
Mm-hmm.
And it even lists us as one of the sister sites, which is nice.
Aw, thanks, guys.
Yeah. So yeah, every now and then Owen or Jason would mention something that was Starfinder specific, and I was like, before I comment, I better make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And everything that I searched on the site was there. Some information is there, and if you plan on being a Starfinder super fan or like major into the Starfinder lore, you can do the entire community a favor and start adding information we know from previews, and when you get your copy of the rulebook, you can start adding information that's, actually published information about Starfinder. I know I'll appreciate it because the Pathfinder wiki has helped me understand Galarian more often than, quite often.
And I know that there's going to be a D20 SFRD that will launch when Starfinder comes out too. So there's going to be a rules reference document website from the people that make D20 PFSRD. I know a lot of our fans use that website because a whole lot of people use that website. Diving Rhino asks if there's any word on Hero Lab for Starfinder or when it will be available. There is no official word. That's the official stance. There's no official word on that. We do know it will exist, and they're hosting a panel at Gen Con. So with them and a bunch of other electronic people, the crew. It's going to be them and Sirenscape and all the people we love. Sirenscape is definitely also getting really big into the Starfinder because, hey, I need more sci-fi stuff. They actually already have an extensive sci-fi sound sets available, so we're going to be able to hit the ground running a little bit when Starfinder comes out, because there's already the space battles that you can do, and you go, lasers now.
All right, is that it for Starfinder shoutouts, or is there anything else you think people need to know about?
That's it for Starfinder shoutouts.
All right, for a couple of Pathfinder shoutouts, the New Paths Compendium from Cobalt Press. It is up on Kickstarter for the next 41 hours.
Oh.
And they're currently at $28,000 of an $11,000 goal. So you might be wondering why I'm bringing your attention to this. Well, first of all, it is a hardcover collection of the New Paths classes. So any of the new classes that were introduced in Cobalt Quarterly, they've been collected once before, and now they're being edited, updated again, and collected once again in a hardcover this time. And it's called the Pathfinder RPG Expanded Edition. And the hardcover is, I believe, a major selling point of this. But it was just announced that the Savant, one of the classes, actually possibly the only class, that was being excluded from the update, if they get $30,000, the Savant will be added to it, and I am in talks with Wolfgang to redesign it, because I was in talks with them earlier with what I thought was just an editing pass, and so when the Kickstarter launched and it called out that Savant would not be in it, I was kind of disappointed in myself. I thought I'd missed an opportunity, because the Savant is a class that I am well known for. It's one of my first major writing credits for the Pathfinder role-playing game, and something that a lot of people consider they consider that as my breakout writing credit for Pathfinder. So it was kind of a bummer to think that it wouldn't be collected with the other new Path classes. But the other thing is that it was always a class that was not what it was originally intended to be. I pitched the Savant as a class called the Coffer, and the idea was it's He-Man the class. It's most of the time you're just a regular dude, and then you can become a superpowered being. It's Thor, it's the Hulk, it's Shazam. It's like this. It's more of a superpower trope, but it is a trope, and you cannot do that in Pathfinder. So that's what I pitched, and then they liked elements of it, but they didn't like the main idea. So then it was like, all right, what about the raconteur, where you're telling stories, and the stories then become embodied, or you become better at adventuring because of the details in your story are enhancing your abilities. And they kind of like that, but then they added a jack of all trades element to it, and then that became the Savant. But the Savant was also a jack of all trades that told stories and could create heroes. So it was something that just, it was everything. It was like a class with a long legacy that nobody knew about. So since the Savant came out, archetypes have become a thing. Other classes that gain abilities as they go have become a thing. So the raconteur, the coffer, they're all going to be turned into, I hope by the end, archetypes for the Savant. The base Savant is just going to be the jack of all trades. It's going to be a much simpler class, and it's going to use existing mechanics to make that a lot smoother. And then if you are a fan of the complicated version of the Savant, I'm going to make sure that the archetypes are stackable so that you can have the Savant, raconteur, coffer all as one large complicated class that can do anything and can be multiple people at one time, because someone is telling a story about all these great things that he can do.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yes, but I'm happy, Param. That's the main thing. I'm happy that the Savant gets to live on and become more the class that it deserved to be.
I'm happy too.
Speaking of happy, the reason that I was able to take on the Savant as a freelancer once again was because a gnome in need has shipped to backers.
Ooh.
If you remember back in 2012 when we launched a Kickstarter to help us fund the 2013 No Direction season, which was what the Kickstarter was for.
Campaign was 12 to 13 or 13 to 14?
The campaign was November 2012.
Okay.
And so it was to get new equipment, because if people remember the sound quality at the time, my computer was just falling apart as far as something that could handle audio equipment, audio editing, and whatnot. And at that point, we wanted to increase video coverage of conventions. We wanted to do more convention coverage overall. Like, everything that Kickstarter was primarily for, we delivered on. But a major backer incentive was a gnome in need, an adventure that I was writing that I promised to tell the story of what happened to Millie Narstead, and that it would have all of these cool, like, demi-planes that would have, like, a Mega Man adventure or, like, level selection screen feel to it. And, like, it just felt like the entire concept was done. And we even got some freelancers. We got Adam Daigle and Mark Moreland, both Paizo employees at the time and still are. We've raised enough money that they could be freelancers. And then it just sat there. And it literally sat there for 3 years. Getting worked on, but barely. And it was frustrating and disappointing for everybody involved. But since last October, I believe it was, that we brought Mike Myler on as the project manager on it. We got a couple of other freelancers. We got Savannah Broadway, Alex Greenshields, and Robert Kenzie to help write some of those sections. Mike just righted the ship. He took just my massive notes on the project that weren't amounting to anything, showed me that I was further along than I realized, just needed to organize it better, and managed to get it out. So it was sent to backers. And as an incentive, as a thank you for your patience, we also up to the ante for the final encounter by creating a new hybrid class just for the villain at the end of it, the Kaioken. And then instead of just making enough options of this hybrid class for that one character, we decided to make it a whole 12-page PDF on its own, which is free for all the backers. So right now they're up on DriveThruRPG for $21 for the adventure and $4 for the Kaioken. Those prices are going to go down in about 3 months. I just wanted to make sure that the backers got this and more or less with a measure of exclusivity for the time being. And in a couple of months, it'll become available for everyone, which was never, like, we never called it an exclusive adventure, I don't believe, but we also never said that we would be selling it. So I think that the best compromise is 3 months of exclusivity for our backers, and then anyone else that wants to buy it will be able to buy it for admittedly less than it cost the backers to get it, but the backers were also supporting the stuff that they, the stuff the campaign was actually for. So I believe that this is the best solution for everybody involved, because as soon as it went up, I got messages asking me to justify $21 for a 42-page PDF. In fact, I didn't even know it was up in the store. I had sent it for approval, and before I even saw the email saying that this was officially in the store, Jacob Blackman contacted me saying, like, did you put the right price on there? Is there a typo somewhere?
Oh, I'm just really glad that our listeners are finally going to be able to get this. I know it's sort of been a shadow hanging over our heads for a while.
Yes, and it's 100% been my fault and on my plate. Like, I'm the only one that could solve it and the only one that was holding things up. That was a bad situation, which is why Mike was such an excellent asset to bring on board. And now it allows me to go back to freelancing, and it allows us to pursue other options that we are not ready to discuss openly.
Right. Okay, that's everything I have to shout out. Is that all the shout outs from your end?
No, there's one thing that I've been meaning to shout out to for like the last 3 episodes.
Oh.
Andrew Hoskins did a video on the Kineticist.
Oh.
He did it July 2nd. Maybe I'm not as far. No, I am exactly as far behind as I thought I was. And it's just a great analysis of the Kineticist, which is a class that has a worse reputation than it deserves. This is a rare situation where it was layout hurt the class and hurt the playability of the class, especially because it seemed like a perfectly logical, easy-to-run class in the playtests. And by the time it actually got to print, things had been spread out strangely, and people could no longer follow how to make your character and play it. So, Andrew is like, he is a freelancer for Paizo. He's started to write their specials for Gen Con, and he knows things when it comes to the Pathfinder system, and he is going to be doing a series of legend lore videos, and he started with the Kineticist, just making sure he demystified the Kineticist. And I recommend, if you have any interest in that class, and more broadly, if you have an interest in the occult classes, which do have a bit of a reputation for being a little more complicated, check out the video. It's a great start to this series. Mm-hmm. And I guess one more thing, I should make people aware that Tina is due in the next couple of weeks for our second child. And so I don't know when you'll hear from me next. You'll see me at Gen Con, because as soon as Tina found out she was pregnant, and we did the math, and we realized that her original due date was a week before Gen Con, she gave me permission to go to Gen Con because it was too important to me as a work thing. But yeah, I will not be recording podcasts if Tina needs me. So there's a very good chance I won't be on the next episode, and it might be a month or so before people hear from me. Mm-hmm. Just giving you the update. She's due August 7th. We'll see when it actually happens.
Yeah, I look forward to congratulating you, and
thank you.
And we will do what we can in your absence.
Yeah, having more random halfling encounters, as somebody described it when Scarlett walked in, because at this point, it's just easier to let her come in and say, who's that, to everyone that's on the screen for 5 minutes and then walk away, than it's just try and stop her.
Don't lie. You're just trying to get another co-host. We're reaching
she's
for
like,
that
"Who's
youth
that?" It's like,
demographic.
he is the one you are replacing.
Oh no.
Remember that hat. Someday you will track it down. Then you will wear the hat.
Now I'm gonna have to buy her a little hat.
I told you that I would be the evil Cyclops in about 30 years.
You did. You totally did.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out which X-Men I am yet.
Beast?
Oh, that'd make me a Gen 1 one, but I'm totally not Gen 1.
You kind of are. I mean, like, you were there before there was a network.
That's true.
People have no idea what we're talking about, Pam.
No, they don't. Inside jokes are bad for podcast, especially when the
Indeed.
audience isn't even in on it. All right, guys.
But apparently Bastille is Magneto. All right.
Okay, a final thing. Gen Con. We talked about it a bunch, but hey, it's going to be August 17th through the 20th. Is this the right dates I'm saying? 17th through 20th.
Yeah.
We will be there in various capacities. If you see us, hey, come up and say hi. We'd love to meet you. I'd love to shake your hand. And, of course, pay attention to our Facebook page. I'm going to be basically letting everybody know all the news that comes out. I'm going to have a lot more free time this time, so I probably will post around a lot of pictures of what I'm doing and having fun at Gen Con. And hey, if there's open seats, I'll say so, etc. if you want to try and jump in the game with me.
Awesome. I recommend everyone try and game with Pam. I guess you would be playing, though, right? You're not just going to jump in as a GM?
No, yeah, no.
Hey, there's 5 players just sitting here waiting for somebody to run something. Pair 'em!
I have some big slots that I'm intending to either, throw down a pickup game or go to the board game library, etc., etc. I love this network and all that we've got to do, but I've not got to actually enjoy a Gen Con in about 4 years. It's all been work. And I love the experience. I love what we do, but I'm going to really get to enjoy, thanks to many great volunteers this year. We're not going to lose coverage. We're going to have the same great coverage. I'm going to really get to enjoy that, play some games. I'm even going to play a not Pathfinder game or a Starfinder game. Sorry. I'm going to play some MechWarrior. Because I like giant robots.
Which is basically Starfinder.
When Starfinder gets mecha, that'll be great. I can't wait till mecha Starfinder happens. But I like me some giant robots, as most people that know me do.
Actually, since we're talking about Gen Con, I should point out, I ran a poll a couple of weeks ago about if you would like an official No Direction meetup. It was a long shot. I just wanted to gauge interest. And interest, I believe, is there. Mm-hmm. So instead of hastily putting something together this year, and I know this might sound frustrating to people that are going this year but might not be able to go next year, but next year we're going to book something. We're going to do it early enough. We're going to make sure that, because we got over a dozen responses, all yes. Nobody said no, possibly because nobody that didn't want they just wouldn't take the poll.
Right.
But anyway, we got enough people that, if we put something together, this could be a good time, and I'd like to hang out with some of our listeners, especially people that at Gen Con I do not get a chance to talk to. If you come to the Blind Ferret booth, I will say hello. We can talk a couple of minutes, and then I will try and sell you something. It's just what I have to do. It's why I'm at Gen Con.
Yay! All right, so that's it. We're done.
All right. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.